you. Well, welcome everybody. I'm going to call this meeting to order. It's my trusty gavel here. This is the City Council meeting on Wednesday, April 14, 2021. May we please have a roll call?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Hinsey.
Here.
Councilmember Lyons.
Here.
Councilmember Mosca.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Kranz.
Here.
And Mayor Blakespear.
Here.
Record will show that all members of the City Council are present.
Okay, thank you. I invite you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we do not have any special presentations today, do we? Do we have any?
No, we do not.
Okay, and so we'll move to oral communications.
Okay, we do have several. And for all of those listening that are under oral communications, I will call your name. Make sure that you unmute your microphone, and then you will have 3 minutes. Our first speaker is Chris Tulis.
Hello, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. You can start when ready.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Tullis. I am a resident of Encinitas. I spoke with my District 2 Councilmember Hinsey, and she recommended that I attend today really just for 2 very simple reasons. Number 1, just to introduce myself, which I just did. And number 2, just to let you know about an issue on Saxony between Leucadia and Encinitas that I'm working on. I'm going to put together, based on my council members' recommendation, a little more detail for you. So you'll see more at a future meeting, but I wanted to at least introduce myself and tell you I'm working on it. I saw a need very quickly on Saxony when I moved into this townhouse here based on the pedestrian traffic that moves in between Leucadia and Encinitas. What I observed was just a ton of pedestrian traffic, kids, dogs, adults, and especially parents with strollers that were having trouble walking safely because the sidewalks aren't complete. So I thought I would prepare for you guys consideration some ideas of how that might be improved for the safety of the pedestrians here, especially given that some of the development that is coming in near our community. So I'm working on it. I know it will be, one of many considerations that you have. I hope it will be a low cost yet high impact one for this group to consider, but I wanted to at least let you know that this is something that I feel like would be a great improvement to our community, and I'll be pulling something together for you. That's it.
Great, thank you so much. Our next speaker is Sanjam Sama. Let's see if he's on here. I do not see Sanjam yet, so I'll come back to that person. Let's see, how about Richard Kipnis?
Hello, I'm Richard Kipnis. Thank you, council members. I really didn't have anything prepared to say today. I thank you all for your service. And I know we're going to be talking about bonus density affect our community with traffic issues. I live on Bonita Drive near Oak Knolls Elementary School, and there's always a traffic issue over there. And if we're going to add a lot more housing to Santa Fe Drive, and especially Belore with the 30 new houses, that's going to overtax the roads over there. And I just wish that people would do an accurate count of traffic and pedestrian traffic to and from Ocean Knolls Elementary down Bonita Drive, that is the unincorporated or the public-private part of Bonita Drive between Belore and Requesa. That road needs deep repair. That's basically all I had to say today. I'll be listening intently to see how the discussion moves.
Great,
Thank
thank you. Our next speaker is Cindy Cremona.
Thank you, Kathy. Cindy Cremona here. Resident of Encinitas and member of Encinitas Viewpoint. Mayor Blakespear, it is a sad day for Encinitas. Our planning department voted to raise our affordable income inclusionary housing requirement from 15% to 50%, 5-0, for all new housing developments. This would mean Encinitas could reach our state requirement in a reasonable amount of time and lessen the burden on our city and environment. HCD supports it and our housing attorney supports it. Developers would still make a profit. Staff has conveniently pulled this item off the agenda for further consideration. The city doesn't seem to have any intention of putting it back on the agenda for the mayor and council to vote on, and one has to wonder why. Why wouldn't the mayor of Encinitas want to preserve her city? Why would the mayor of Encinitas burden her streets with more traffic and her city's children with crowded schools, as well as eat up what's left of our open space? So tell us why that is, Mayor Blakespear. Are you too busy running for a Senate seat than to pay attention to the needs that your present job requires? Will your developer sponsors hold you accountable when it's time for the next PAC to fund your future campaigns? Do you think 5,700 more houses, apartments, and condos will be better for Encinitas without infrastructure support or additional schools than the lesser amount of 1,700? This is a 4,000 unit difference, 4,000. And council members, Kelly, Joy, Tony, and Joe, why aren't you demanding this come before you to vote yes for your district's constituents? Do you not recognize how important this issue is? Or are you once again playing follow the leader and putting your duties to your residents aside? Mayor and council, you may think if you do nothing that this issue and agenda item will go away. I assure you, it will not. If it takes a visit to the DA or legal action, members of this community will no longer stand for the level of corruption being perpetrated on them. So do yourselves a huge favor and get this item back on the agenda for a vote. Believe me, Mayor Blakespear, you do not want the coming scandal this is about to turn into. Joe and Joy, if you plan to run for your council seats or the mayor's seat in 2022, you might want to cover your backsides, not Mayor Blakespear's, because this issue isn't going away. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Michael Morales. I do not see him on the list. Cynthia Shea Palmer, you're next.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thanks. This is the first time I've spoken at a Zoom meeting since the to the City Council anyway. So let me introduce myself. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. My name is Cynthia Shea Palmer, and I've been in Leucadia for over 30 years. I've raised my family here. I've followed and been involved in the housing element, monitoring, and sometimes being, heavily involved as time permits. Certainly difficult when raising a family and working full time. I'm sure you can understand. I'm going to get to my summary now, just so I don't run out of time. But reading in the Coast News about the amendment, the 15 to 50% not coming in front of the City Council, I would like to make that request to put the amendment to the City Municipal Code to increase the inclusionary housing percentage from 15 to 50% on the agenda and take it to a vote and hopefully approve it. We don't need more market rate units. We need to meet the intent of the affordable housing directive from the state. So just to back up, so that is my ask. To back up, my understanding of the purpose of the entire intent of the housing element is to provide affordable housing, and that it's being directed by the state. We're told our hands are tied. The affordable housing element, I know, we are told, is targeted to people working in the area, like the public servants and the teachers, the firefighters, the police, and so on. So reconciling that intent with the low target of 15% is difficult. I mean, and said in a different way, it seems like our goal is 85% unaffordable housing. Reconciling that with the in lieu fees, which avoid the intent of the affordable housing, is difficult. And nor can I reconcile why the amendment from 15 to 50% was moved from the agenda. I mean, we know the housing element is significantly going to impact the Encinitas quality of life, especially where those developments proposed are in areas where there is no supporting infrastructure, like the Myers property. I will call that property out. It's buried in the back of a residential neighborhood. It's established in the 40s. We have single lane streets. We have no main artery. And this neighborhood's going to be severely impacted. There's a total of about 180 houses in the entire neighborhood. And we're getting a 200 unit housing element buried in the back using the same streets. 170 of those are going to be unaffordable. Okay, there's only 30 of them that are going to be affordable. So with this 50% affordable housing resulting in a reduction of 4,000 high density market rate units will make the housing element plan smarter and less disruptive. So we're maxed out on infrastructure with all the growth going in, with all the accessory units going in. That's water, that's roads, that's schools. So my ask, thanks for the time. My ask is to get that 15 to 50% amendment on the agenda in front of the City Council, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Susan Turney. Susan, you can start when ready.
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Susan Turney, Encinitas. Last month, planning commissioners voted to increase the inclusionary or affordable housing requirement from 15% to 50%. They have the backing of State Housing Agency, HCD, and the city's housing attorney. Commissioner Doyle showed an in-depth analysis that proved that developers still make a good profit at 50%. 50% affordable would meet mandated state numbers more quickly and reduce the total number of high density units needed by about 4,000. That's 4,000 units and 40,000 fewer cars on our roads daily. Late last week, it became apparent that someone doesn't want this. Scheduled to finalize the discussion this week with a vote on in lieu fees before moving before the council next month, staff abruptly removed the item from the agenda. They claimed they needed more time to work on the issue, which makes no sense given that commissioners had already voted. Staff also recommends that the discussion be, quote, continued off calendar, end quote, which could table the item indefinitely. However, staff do not have the authority to change the agenda. Only the council does, and only after a public hearing, which has not been held. This interference in the Planning Commission process has all the appearances of corruption. Clearly, the council doesn't want to hear a 50% affordable recommendation. It would be embarrassing for you trying to defend the 15% that you claim all along is the best you can do. Developers who heavily supported your campaigns want desperately to maintain the pathetically low 15% and leave 85% available for $1 million luxury units. After voting to support 50% affordable last month, Planning Commissioner Sherrod wrote to me to say, quote, I hope my comments don't result in being kicked off of Planning Commission, end quote. Her disturbing worry confirms what so many believe, that City Hall lives a life separate from the one you show the public, one of fear, intimidation, and manipulation designed to serve the BIA and not residents. Those of you just elected ran on platforms of compassion. You recently created an equity commission. How do you reconcile these publicly displayed values with your covert attempts to block public discussion on making affordable housing real? You need to know that your actions speak a lot louder than your words. So let the normal process run unobstructed. Stop pulling levers behind the scenes. Do not manipulate, bury, or attempt to delay a transparent public consideration of affordable housing. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Christine Schindler. Christine, you can start when ready.
All right, very good. You can hear me?
You're a little muted.
Okay. Better?
That's much better.
Okay, thanks so much. Christine Schindler, East Encinitas. I want to thank you for your service first and foremost. What a year it has been with a lot of challenges. I wanted to make mention of the importance of non-infrastructure education encouragement when it comes to all things active transportation, including safe routes to school. So I'll continue to nudge, encourage, and do what I can to help so that we are, in addition to thinking about infrastructure dollars, that we're also thinking about non-infrastructure. A lot of talk about North Leucadia, rightly so these days. I definitely encourage forward movement as far as at-grade crossings. There's a lot of opportunity in Leucadia, and as people have said and will say again, there's a lot of development and traffic, and whatever we can do to make east-west connections easier on foot by bike to augment all the motorist traffic, that would be wonderful. And La Costa, I'm just sending good thoughts. I really, it's such a constricted roadway, and I'm just not really sure what the solution is at this point with the developments that are under construction, constructed, and under planning. I just really not sure what's going to happen there, but I do cheer you on. And we have a lot of opportunities where we can improve some areas more quickly and cheaper with paint on the pavement projects, so POP projects. So I'll continue as a resident, a bicyclist, a transit user, and a Encinitas Bike Walk member to encourage and let you know, kind of push the envelope there as far as paint on the pavement projects. Thank you so much for what you do, and I look forward to hearing the rest of this meeting.
Next speaker is Tyler McCormick. Tyler, you have 3 minutes. You can start when ready.
Good evening. My name is Tyler McCormick. I'm currently a sophomore in high school. Over the weekend, I saw an article in the Times of San Diego written by teens who are disturbed about the way commercialized marijuana is changing the community. I understand how they feel. Many of us have plans to pursue a career like becoming a doctor, teacher, or an engineer. Using marijuana will not bring any of us closer to reaching our goals. In fact, it can cause students to lose interest in school, and their grades can suffer. The marijuana industry tries to convince people that pot shops will benefit the community, but many of us see the marijuana industry for what it is. It takes advantage of people's vulnerabilities and thrives by addicting its customers. We can see how marijuana is changing our neighborhoods. In San Diego, marijuana billboards are everywhere. We see signs, spinners, flyers, advertisements, and party buses plastered with logos. I hope the same thing doesn't happen in Encinitas. The ads scream for attention. They use bright color and show young-looking people who seem to be having a great time, but they're hiding the negative effects of marijuana that has on physical and mental health, particularly when it's used by teenagers and young adults. Tobacco companies were finally ordered to include a warning label on cigarette packs. When will marijuana companies be ordered to do the same? Years from now, many people will see that commercializing the marijuana industry has been a huge mistake, but it's my generation that will suffer the greatest consequences. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Irene Abraham. Irene, you can start when ready.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor Blakespear, Deputy Mayor Krantz, and council members Hinsey, Lindis, and Muska. I'm Irene Abraham, the chair of the Encinitas Commission for the Arts. I'm speaking about the letter we sent concerning the development of the Pacific View site as an art center. This letter was unanimously approved on April 5th, 2021 by the Commission for the Arts and sent for consideration to the council. The purpose of the letter is to support the further development of the Pacific View site as a dedicated cultural center for the arts. I'll give a brief summary of the letter that we submitted. First, I want to mention that the Commission for the Arts wishes to express our deep appreciation to the City Council for the identification of Pacific View as a high priority project. The survey results of Encinitas residents last fall showed that over 73% support the view that, in quotes, the original plan to use the property as a cultural arts center should be pursued, end quote. The Arts Commission agrees that the Pacific View site should remain as a site solely for the arts, both as a venue for performances, the display of art, and the practice of the performing and visual arts. Given the current movement to activate the Pacific View site, the Arts Commission would like to request the following from the City Council. That the Pacific View site be dedicated solely for the arts in its most broad definition. That the construction of a small performance space, classroom spaces, and studio spaces be included in the current renovation plan. That the Arts Commission is included in the planning process for the activation of the site once the repairs have been completed, including new entitlements for the site as necessary. And that the Arts Commission be included in discussions for long-range planning for further development of the site to create enhanced uses and facilities, including a larger performance space and adequate parking arrangements. The Arts Commission is asking for a reply to these requests included in this letter from the Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Irene. Our next speaker is Leah Bissonette. Leah, you can start when ready.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. There are two issues that this City Council needs to consider tonight. Number one, the Council has repeatedly stated that it must authorize many new housing units in order to meet the state required standards for affordable housing, as some other speakers have mentioned. The Planning Commission established an alternative to meet the housing standards while building 4,000 fewer units. That alternative is to require that developers build a higher percentage of affordable units as part of any new project. With a higher percentage of affordable units, fewer overall units are needed, and the city is less impacted by increased density, traffic and health, and safety needs. The city has taken this alternative off the table, thus condemning the many neighbors in the city to extensive new developments. The only parties that benefit from this action are the developers, who will be able to realize higher profits. The city's action will hurt the residents and the neighborhoods and decrease the amount of the affordable housing that is built in the near terms. How do you like that for equity for the people looking for affordable housing? The second issue is also troublesome, however, as it sets a bad precedent and suggests that this council is not willing to accept input even from the members of its appointed commissions. The Planning Commission had brought forward this recommendation for a higher percentage of affordable housing in new developments. The Planning Commission had researched the topic and found this alternative works in other cities. The item was continued to this coming April 15th so that planning commissioners could finalize their recommendations for the council to consider in May. In an unprecedented move to interfere with the deliberation process, planning staff, without notice to the planning commissioners, removed the item from the agenda indefinitely. This leaves us with the current 15% default affordable housing percentage and the resultant requirement that thousands and thousands of new high-density housing be authorized. It is insulting to our commissioners to ignore and override their input in this manner, and it is an affront to all citizens that the work of our commissioners be hijacked before it is even presented to the public. Not overridden, just simply hijacked and thrown away. I ask this council to choose the better alternative for more affordable housing quickly and to let the work of the commission see the light of day. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kevin Williams. I do not see Kevin on the list. So we will move to Kathleen Lindeman. Kathleen, you can start when ready.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, thank you. This is my first time doing this. Hi, Kathleen Lindeman, Leucadia. I want to address the Planning Commission's inclusionary housing agenda item from the March 18th meeting, where after Commissioner Doyle shared an in-depth analysis showing different percentage scenarios of inclusionary housing versus profitability, and following the ensuing discussion, the commissioners voted unanimously to increase inclusionary housing from the current measly 15% to the win-win scenario of 50%. As you are all aware, that item was to be continued as an agenda item at the upcoming April 15th Planning Commission meeting. So you can imagine my shock when the planning staff, without notice to the Planning Commission, removed the item from the regular agenda and recommended it be placed off calendar indefinitely. This would leave our current 15%, the default affordable housing percentage. Who on the staff has the power to override a decision made by the Planning Commission and interfere with the democratic process going forward? I am going to assume it was a goof, a mistake, and oops, our bad, because I don't want to think that any elected officials were involved in trying to sabotage this going forward. So in conclusion, if this error in judgment has not already been rectified, I urge you to do so tonight. Thank you in advance for your time, attention to transparency, and honesty as you deal with this issue.
Thank you, Kathleen. Our next.
Would it be possible to get staff to address this issue? I've heard that's about the third comment on the Planning Commission agenda. Is there a way to get a response at this point?
Yes, if I could, Madam Mayor, I would be happy to have our Deputy Director of Community Development address this.
That would be great. Please do so.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, council members, Royce Powell, Assistant Director of Development Services. Regarding the issue related to inclusionary tonight, that item was before the Planning Commission on in March 2021. As all the speakers mentioned, the Planning Commission took several actions, one of which to increase the inclusionary housing requirement. Actually, it was only for the R30 sites and not for citywide. So the 50% election was only for R30 sites. That item was continued to April 15th, as all the speakers mentioned. Unfortunately, due to workload and also to manage the Planning Commission agenda, that we staff elected to continue the item off calendar. However, we are planning to bring that forward to Planning Commission on May 20th for the commission to continue their deliberation and hopefully make a recommendation to the City Council. If they make a recommendation on May 20th, we plan to bring that forward to City Council, either the last meeting in June or the first meeting in August.
And I know I didn't influence your decision to make this change to the agenda. Were there any elected officials that had input into that decision?
This decision was basically it was solely based on the workload and also managing the Planning Commission, future Planning Commission agendas. We have several items, private development and other policy documents that are slated for the first meeting in May. And because those items were already slated, that we felt that we needed to consider the agendas, and the next available agenda was May 20th, but that was decided after we published the agenda report for the continuation of the item. But this was solely based on staff's decision, based on workload and the Planning Commission agenda.
Thank you.
And just one more question. So, and I feel certain that none of the electeds were involved in this at all. I mean, it really was, staff was making decisions with the fact that our principal planner, we have one housing person and she is working on the housing element. So I think that the reality is we have a lot of housing work and it all falls on Jennifer Gates. And, I think that decision was made by the staff because she just wasn't able to get all the information together. But when you use the term continued off calendar, I don't even understand what you're saying there, because you're saying that you continued it to a future planning commission date. So what does it mean when you say we continued it off calendar?
That's the language that we use. If in order for an item to not be renoticed, that you had to continue an item to a certain date. But if you don't continue an item to a certain date, the planning staff is obligated to issue a new notice. So because we continued it off calendar, because we didn't know, we didn't have a set date at the time. So we recommended to continue it off calendar, but staff will issue a new notice for the future hearing date. And right now we're slated to bring that forward to the Planning Commission on May 20th, and we will issue a new notice for that hearing.
Okay, thank you. And I do hope that you can just make sure to keep that date. And we have been talking about the inclusionary percentage for so long, and we hired a consultant to try to get the highest percentage that would be accepted by HCD. And I do hope we can put this to bed, because we have been talking about this for a long time. So, let's try to prioritize that work.
And I noticed at the last meeting when the vote was for 50% that we received an email from Robin Huntley at HCD. Will that be part of the staff report that comes out for the May item?
Yes, that will be included. And I do want to address, if I could, the issue related to HCD supporting the 50%. We have not received any documentations or emails or inquiries from HCD expressing support of the 50% inclusionary requirement. So
you received what Councilmember Kranz is referring to as a letter that opposes 50%. Is that what you're saying? Or says it doesn't comply, or what?
They requested that we provide additional incentives if we choose to increase our inclusionary to 50%. They are making suggestions that we should incentivize affordable housing if we want to increase up to 50%. So basically what we have today in our inclusionary ordinance does not meet the intent. So that's one of the reasons why we continued the item, is for us to have the conversations to better understand HCD's position. So
okay, I see. Thank you. I can see the city attorney leaning forward to say this is not agendized. We can't go into it. So I'm going to just say thank you very much. And let's let the rest of the public comments move forward. And thank you for clarifying that here in the middle of the comments.
Okay, our next speaker is Gerald Kessler. Gerald, you can start when ready. Gerald, we can't hear you. Gerald, we still can't hear you. Gerald, you can start when ready. I see your hand raised. Your microphone is off. You can start speaking.
I think she's having technical issues.
Okay, well, let's move to the next person, which is Steve Gra. Let me see if he's on the list. I do not see Steve. Let's see. Mark Wilcox. You can start when ready.
Okay, is that good?
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, City Council members. My name is Mark Wilcox. I came here tonight because I wanted to share this information regarding a prominent media article on marijuana. Recently, an editorial in the Colorado Springs Gazette by the original author behind Colorado's Prop 64, Robert Corey, wrote that, quote, "The current reality I was too naive to anticipate 10 years ago is that the commercialized, for-profit, elitist, government-protected, privileged, monopolistic industry that perpetuates itself and its obscene profits would be detrimental to the public good and the planet Earth. The inmates are running Colorado's marijuana asylum. Amendment 64 created a corporate lobby that punches far above its weight to demonstrate this industry's unjustified political clout. Even during a pandemic, the governor and the Denver mayor deemed marijuana businesses essential, while schools, churches, gyms, and most other non-big box stores were shut. So it was not essential to educate our children, our future, but it was essential to maintain those children's access to high potency corporate marijuana, and access it they surely do. This industry genetically modifies plants at a level that would make Monsanto blush, fouls our planet with chemicals and wasteful growing systems, harms the poor and children, is dominated by the wealthy and privileged, and proclaims its brilliance to a nauseating degree. Corporate marijuana is Colorado's worst environmental polluter. It pumps chemicals and carbon greenhouse gases into our air, uses tons of energy, harms our climate, dirties our drinking water, and ruins our environment. It stinks, literally and figuratively. Most of the foul-smelling warehouses are next door to a poor or minority neighborhood whose children grow up smelling the skunky chemical stench, end quote. Hopefully we can learn from the errors made in Colorado. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Steve Gherkin. Steve, you can start when ready.
Hello, Kathy. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. City Council, Mayor Blakespear, thank you for having the opportunity to let me talk. I'm going to be brief because I think much of what I wanted to say has already been said regarding the Planning Commission's decision to recommend a 50% level of inclusionary housing in R30 properties. So thank you, Councilman Kranz, for asking that question about what do we know. I think that given the past, when staff had made decisions on the prior housing element that allowed developers to backroom certain issues, it's really important for you guys to stay out in front of this and not let this seem co-opted by the building industry. I support all of what the other speakers have said earlier, that moving to a 50% level or a level that is much higher than 15% would certainly help us meet the goals that the council worked so hard to create affordable housing in Encinitas. It would let us meet our housing mandates more quickly. And of course, as everyone has said, it would reduce the requirements to build so much high density housing in Encinitas without the infrastructure to support it. So I look forward to Mr. Sapao bringing this back and his staff bringing this matter back for the Planning Commission, as he said he would. And that I look forward to having a fully informed discussion by the Planning Commission and the City Council on this matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Our next speaker is Terry Ann Skilly. I do not see her on the list registered here. Let's see, next is Julie Thunder. Julie, you can start when ready.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Council. I'm Julie Thunder, a resident of Cardiff. Our city has a tremendous opportunity to raise our inclusionary housing rates from the meager 15% approved by this council to something more meaningful, like the 50% recently approved by our hardworking Planning Commission. These percentages apply to the properties that were upzoned with the housing element. You remember that time you all voted to submit the plan after residents voted no on it. And then you also reversed Prop A, which is our only protections against government and developers running amok. When you improperly upzoned these properties for apartments, you were telling developers they only had to provide 15% of their units as affordable. I ask you, why are you giving away Encinitas to developers? You should require 50% of them, which would get us to our state mandated goal much faster with far less impacts, which has been said many times tonight, I realize that. So you have chosen winners and losers here with these questionable upzonings. The winners are the developers who will make millions of extra dollars from your tiny inclusionary rate. The losers are us, the residents, who will be stuck with the extra 85% of units that will bring more traffic, crowded schools, and taller buildings than any of us ever wanted in our town. My question to each of you is, in responding to that letter from the state's HCD, why not negotiate with them? If 50% is too high for them, maybe they would accept 40% or 30%. Both are far better than 15. So is the problem that nobody here knows how to negotiate, or is there a fear of state officials? Or worse, are you in support of the state's overreach into our land use decisions? The public has been begging you to protect our town, but you ignore us. And now you appear to be retracting your very own Planning Commission's 50% inclusionary plan in a sneaky and underhanded way. You were elected to represent, not to roll over. Oh, and one more thing. Don't be in such a rush with Leucadia. Slow down streetscape and incorporate pedestrian crossings before you cut thousands of people off from their walkability lifestyle. Better yet, cut your losses and scrap the whole piecemeal, overpriced project. Then you can pursue the far superior idea of lowering the tracks. Think boldly. Carlsbad is lowering their tracks, and so can we. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Donna Westbrook. I do not see Donna's name here. Okay. Dennis Caden.
Am I being heard well?
We can hear you, yes.
Thank you. As I understand it, Mayor Blakespear, Barbara Couts, the Special Housing Attorney and Planning Commissioner Chair Bruce Ellers, and the State of California Housing Department have all come to a supportive agreement that 50% affordable dwelling units are acceptable. This change from 15 to 50% was approved in a vote of the Planning Commissioners. Yes. Am I being heard?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. In addition, an analysis proving developer profitability at 50% was submitted by Commissioner Doyle. Commissioners concluded that 50% affordable dwelling units could be reasonably built rather than the 15% the council has currently advocated so well. And we would reach our RHNA goals faster and in fact eliminate the need for an additional 4,000 dwelling units. It's my understanding that HCD approved the 50% and is supporting it. The developers and builders can still make a profit by building 50% affordable and 50% market rate dwelling units. It's a win-win for the citizens of our city, current and new, a win-win for the state housing department, RHNA's numbers, and a win-win for developers and builders as well. This equation supports the precepts that our city was founded upon: preservation of community character and quality of life for present and future generations, while cutting down on traffic and the generation of excessive greenhouse gases. Now the children of families who live here will be able to buy homes, live here as well, a concern and desire expressed so often by so many citizens in our city. So once this analysis was agreed upon and accepted by the city's housing attorney, the Planning Commission, and most of all, the State Housing Department, and it was supported by the State Housing Department, why have the Planning Commissioners been told by staff who lack the authority to make the change, and I repeat, staff lacks the authority to make a change, what was given in item 6C on the Planning Commissioners' consent calendars for the week of April 15th. The recommended action was the item has been continued off calendar. Staff does not have the ability to make that decision. Any dictate to staff and action of this sort had to have come from our mayor, who apparently has changed her mind and is obstructing the commission vote, silencing once again the voices of citizens and now their representatives. It is important again to note that only the council can interfere with planning commission agendas, but only after discussion in public, which they did not do. So please allow this proposal on inclusionary housing to go through the full process. And one has to ask, what's going on in this city? Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Our next speaker was Hoyt Doggin, but I do not see Hoyt listed here. Next speaker is Marianne Penton.
Okay, here we go. Ready?
Yes.
Okay. First, I want to say that I really appreciate all you guys do in the city council. You are so multitasked and you have so many layers, and I continually see it all the time, and I want to thank you for doing the best you can do. I especially appreciate the attention of the council and planning and traffic departments for Northwest Leucadia. We're behind, but we're catching up thanks to your considerations. We're now watching as the DG parking strip and cable fencing goes up along the 1.3-mile corridor between La Costa Boulevard and Leucadia Boulevard. And we see a DG path being built on the northern end. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, guys. We really appreciate it. I'd like to ask again, though, how local residents and visitors are being forced to now drive to access public transportation for work, the beach, the commercial zone along Coast Highway. By fencing the corridor along Vulcan without having a clear solution to allow for movement across the corridor for the people who have to work and use public access to do that, it's very frustrating for us to observe. In 2007 and 2013, funding was allocated for crossing feasibility and design of one or more rail crossings in North Leucadia, but it's been redirected both times. As allocated money has been taken away, it can be added back. I ask you once more to push this project of rail crossing up to tier 1 and use that money to fund a feasibility and design of one or more rail crossings of any type in Northwest Leucadia. And I also, if I have a little more time, I'd like to also address page 10 in your CIP PowerPoint presentation recommends insertion of a traffic signal or stop signs at the corner of Vulcan Avenue and La Costa Boulevard and other safety and traffic calming efforts. This again illustrates the city's concerns for easing the traffic and safety problems of Northwest Leucadia. And again, I thank you and I really appreciate your efforts. This offer does not include mention of funding for a holistic plan for study for mobility options and obstacles along the corridor, though. Please consider a holistic study first with funding, including a traffic study conducted during commuting hours and weekends, which will then responsibly justify planned safety and traffic calming efforts. Again, I applaud you for all you do, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Steve Scheibe.
Yes, good evening. My name is Steve Scheibe. I am a resident of Leucadia. I have lived here since before the opening of Leucadia Boulevard and before the vote that was taken on that allowed the expansion and the implementation of Home Depot in Encinitas. Both of these things represent quote unquote progress, which is good for the city, but also has its downside. I'm very concerned and somewhat impressed by what seems to me to be the consternation of a broad range of citizens with the city council and with the mayor. It seems that the removal of the housing requirement from the vote it has caused a great deal of concern among the speakers, and it seems to me that the raising of the percentage from 15% to 50% makes a lot of sense. Although it seems again that perhaps that the council and the mayor may have their concerns and may indeed even be against that position. But it would be, from my perspective, it would be helpful if the council and the mayor might speak to that issue. I don't know if that'd be possible tonight or at another point. One other thing is that as I live here in Leucadia, and I'm concerned about the infrastructure that has been placed for new developments, and we'd like to see, if possible, this infrastructure being undergrounded rather than right now I have 4 communication boxes on the side of my yard, which are unsightly, and it seems to me that they could be better distributed and perhaps could be underground at some point as well. Plus, I would like to have the traffic quieted as much as possible. Thank you for your time. Again, thank you for your service. I know this is probably for council members and for the mayor a somewhat thankless task, but it's something that you guys have chosen to do. And I hope that the council and the city and the citizens can get in a line and align themselves with by moving in the same direction. And that would increase the legitimacy of your representation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we will go back to Gerald Kessler. Gerald, we still can't hear you. Appears that there's some technical difficulties on that end. I'm just going to go through the list and make sure we didn't miss anyone that didn't speak earlier.
Okay, I think it's working now.
Oh, there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Let's start when ready.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me yet?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me? Oh, shoot, I can't hear myself. But you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. Let me just get my paperwork. I'm really sorry. Just give me one quick second here. I don't know. We've got a new computer and I got to get my stuff up. Okay, here we go. Again, I would like to discuss the housing element that you approved last week. With no regard for the people of Encinitas, I'm new at this housing cluster, but what I can see is that if you got sued by the state a few years back because you were not in compliance with the housing rules, at that time, why didn't you speak or seek help and mediation with the residents who are directly impacted to assist in the housing issues you are faced with? You and staff are able to make the residents aware of things that are important to you during elections with tons of robocalls and onslaughts of mailers that only fill the landfills. The council should have made the public more aware in this manner. But now you are forcing Encinitas to become a concrete jungle with the state's mandate madness. I don't understand how you and the council, I don't understand you and the council. There's no green housing or any mention of the carbon footprint in any of these housing conundrums. This brings me to the environmental nightmare of the Staver housing project on Melba that plans to put 30+ homes on a narrow street that feeds 5 schools. Traffic is already a nightmare during the school session. And this project will take away a grove of Torrey pines and tear down a beautiful frontage area along Melba and demolish a historical home built in 1938. That is the last little bit of old Encinitas we have in our neighborhood. It brings such joy to all that pass by. The project hydrology report is not accurate. It does not have any idea on how to deal with the runoff and will be flooding the neighborhood with toxins from the prior pesticides that were used in the Staver flower business for years. I encourage you to take a closer look at all these projects you have already approved and examine the environmental nightmare impact they are placing on this quaint community. Okay, thank you. I think that's it. I can't hear anybody, but that was it. Thanks for listening.
And that does conclude speakers. I've looked through all the attendees and I do not see anyone else that's on here to speak.
Okay. Thank you to the public for your comments. We addressed many of them in the middle of that. So our next item is going to closed session report.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and Council and members of the public. While the City Council did not have a closed session tonight, I am reporting out on a special closed session that occurred on March 31st. And I'm reporting out tonight. It's been a while because we're required to report out at a regularly scheduled an open session, and this is the next one after that. So on March 23rd, the closed session consisted of 3 items. The first one was the conference with legal counsel on potential exposure to litigation, one matter. And the City Council met with its special counsel and there was no reportable action on that item. On the second item was conference with legal counsel, City of Encinitas versus Department of Housing and Community Development. The City Council also met with special counsel on that item and there was no reportable action following that. And the third one was closed session conference with legal counsel on existing litigation, CPD Holding versus City of Encinitas. And the City Council met with City Attorney's legal counsel and there is no reportable action on that. And that concludes my report out from the March 31st closed session.
Thank you very much. Now we have our consent calendar.
And we do have a public speaker on the consent calendar.
Okay, let's go ahead and call on them.
Okay, that's Christine Schindler and then Donna Westbrook, a register, but she is not present. Christine, you can start when ready.
Yeah, this is Christine Schindler, East Encinitas. At this point, I'm sorry, because you had a lot of oral communications and I know you want to get to the meat of your agenda. So I just wanted to say the El Camino Real pavement improvement project associated with the Liebenhain Municipal Water District work is a really great example of ATP and paint on the pavement type of improvement. So I'm really happy to see this project in the collaboration with the Water District. That's it. Thank you.
That concludes speakers.
Okay, thank you. I would entertain a motion on consent. Councilmember Mosca.
I'll move this item. This item is an important item, I think, to pass tonight. It's going to close the gap in terms of funding to finish the work on El Camino Real. We have, the work, OMWD has dug up parts of the road and it's patched up and needs to be finished. And so this item will allow us to finish that road, get it into good shape, and start the line adjustment of some of the striping, the green painting of the bike lanes and the mid-block crossing. All of that's going to come. I know a lot of residents have called and asked me about this project, and we are moving as quickly as we can, but this item tonight will allow us to close the gap in the funding. And so I move this item, the staff's recommendation.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion. Councilmember Lyons.
Mayor Blakespear, yes, I'll second the motion.
Okay, great. Let's go ahead and vote.
Councilmember Hensy,
Yes.
Councilmember Lyons,
Yes.
Councilmember Mosca,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Crayons. Deputy Mayor Crayons,
Yes.
Mayor Blakespear.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Now we're on to our action items. So we have one action item, which is discussion and direction on the city's capital improvement program and other operational programs or initiatives. So I will hand it over to city staff to handle this item. How many public speakers do we have on this item?
We have 13 registered.
Okay, so we'll have a staff report and then brief questions from council, specifically questions, not statements. And then we'll go to the public comments, and then we'll go back to the council for comments and direction.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. City Manager Pam Antill. In the city manager business, they tell you you're not really a city manager of a city until you've gone through at least one budget cycle. So I'm super excited that we are moving forward with our first budget, bringing forward since I've been here. Tonight, we're going to do a couple of things specifically. We're going to talk a little bit about the financial status of the city, in part because it's always important for members of the public who maybe are not familiar with how city finances work, where we're at and where we're headed. And also we have some new faces on council that we think would be benefit from this. And then tonight we're going to focus on each year the city designates a portion of general fund money that we put into our capital improvement project program. Tonight's focus will be on those dollars. There are many other capital improvement programs and projects that are going on in the city that are paid for with a multitude of special funds from the state and the feds, et cetera. But tonight we're going to be focused on those items that are coming from this little pot of money that we transfer from the general fund into the capital fund each year. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our finance director, Teresa McBroom, who's going to talk a little bit about the financial overview of the city. And Karen, if you could bring up the presentation, please.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council Member. I'll be giving a brief overview of the city's general fund status as soon as the presentation comes up. All right, thank you. This will be a brief overview of the city's general fund financial status. And with this graph, it represents our revenue and expenditure trends since fiscal year 2015-16. And what we see are revenues growing fairly well until last year when the pandemic hit. So we have 2 years of flat revenues compared to fiscal year 18-19. However, we are expecting growth as we recover from the pandemic. For next year, fiscal year 21-22, the blue line represents an increase from previous operating expenditures, and that's due to reduced expenditures in the current year from COVID. Also, revenues for the current year are projected to be flat. However, it is better than what we budgeted when COVID first hit. Next slide, please. This next schedule was taken directly from the mid-year budget report that was presented to you in March. And it shows our audited fund balance. It shows that we're able to fund our important contingency and budget stabilization reserves. And then it shows the funding for the current budget and funding off-cycle requests throughout the year. We currently have $2.9 million in our available fund balance to spend. Next slide, please. This is a look at our revenues compared to expenditures, and it's a historical look to show that available fund balance is being used for our CIP projects. So the yellow shading are our CIP projects, and in years 16 and 17 and 18 and 19, when you see it higher than their general fund revenues, that's when we were spending the surplus of fund balance over our reserve policy. The reason for that is significant recurring net income from operations each year. We also had a one-time reappropriation of $3.6 million in the current year to fund Tier 1 projects. Next slide, please. And then this is revenue compared to expenditures again, and reflects our forecast going forward. Fiscal years 23-24, in 3 years, through 26-27 has a baseline capital amount of recurring capital, such as our funding for mobility projects, and that's what's shown in yellow. But the baseline capital amount we're talking about is the mobility projects, the storm drain repair, the safe routes to school that we fund every year. The orange shading is remaining funding that we have for additional capital or operational items. If we save up some of the orange amounts in future years, we can afford 1 and 2 big, large projects. So this is good news as we expect to recover from the pandemic and show general fund availability beginning in fiscal year 22-23, which is in 2 years, at $1.5 million, and then between $3 to $5 million beginning in year 23-24. So this is my last slide, and I'm happy to turn this over to Pam, or I can answer questions now or later.
Okay, it doesn't look like we have any questions. So Liz Mayer, you popped on because you do, but otherwise I'll go on to the next slide.
I do have a question. I don't know if we were waiting until the end.
Well, yeah, so just give me a sense of how long the presentations are.
So the next part of the presentation, we probably have maybe 10 more minutes of presentation time.
Okay, I think I'd rather save, I don't want to get bogged down, so I'd rather do the whole presentation and save the questions and then ask the questions, then go to the public comments. So I see both of your hands up, Councilmember Mosca and Lyons, but I think we'll come back to it after we do the whole presentation, just for meeting management purposes. So go ahead through all the slides.
Okay, roger that. So this year we also have a number of key operational requests. The one item that is not on here because it's not operational, but was directed by the council in January, was to hold $1 million for a possible renovation of the Pacific View Elementary School. So it would be confusing if I put it into the slide because it's not really an operational aspect, but I did want to make a note of that there is $1 million that we have set aside for Pacific View. A few big items that we have this year, obviously, is the City Council redistricting. This $220,000 is to conduct a redistricting program the same way that was done several years ago. Ad hoc meetings and then a discussion and decision by City Council. We also have some additional work that we need to continue to do to implement Measure H. We heard you in January to do improved communications program and outreach. So we have put some additional funding in that line item, as well as we have some significant information technology security upgrades with regard to all of our cybersecurity. You probably read in the newspapers how that's a really important thing for all cities so that we are not out of control with our security and people breaking into our system. This year, we've also asked for a senior planner for our community development department with some focus on mobility, and that person would serve as our mobility coordinator. And of course, in January, another area that you asked us to focus on was implementing our homeless action plan, which included a recommendation to add a housing services manager in community development. We have some wonderful new parks and trails, and we need to make sure that we maintain those at the highest level. So we have added some additional funds for the maintenance, including Coastal Rail Trail, our new Olympus Park, et cetera. And we also have some increased attorney services as we look at the year and we make an analysis of the contracted attorney services that we need. We've included some money there. And finally, a little unexpected, but it happens sometimes. We did receive notice that our law enforcement contract with San Diego County Sheriff's Department will increase by a little over 4.5%. And so we built that in as well. Next slide, please. And Teresa, I was going to ask if you could pop on and talk a little bit about how we've divided up this schedule for people to understand.
Okay, so the top part of the schedule shows funding for the next 6 years. And as you know, our CIP program is shown for the current year and 5 years going forward for a total of 6 years. But the upper part of this program are capital improvement projects only. We do have work projects, which are like studies that continue on. And so they'll get the one-time funding and then they're able to use that going forward. And those are the projects that are down below. But what this shows is we have a total of 4.9 that we're able to fund. And that does not include the 1 million that Pam mentioned. And then we've got 3.9 for the second year. And then as we go along in the third through sixth year, you can see that they're mainly the operation, the baseline capital projects that I mentioned before. So I don't know if you want me to go through each project, but some of the newer ones are the North Lucadia Rail Crossing Study for $400,000. The stormwater flooding feasibility study for $250,000. And then you can just see going down that list. And because of the funding that we have, because of the flat revenues that I showed you, a lot of these are baseline capital projects. And then we had to focus on the projects like the Santa Leo Bridge pavement failure repair that's required to do. The Beacons Beach parking lot, that's for safety reasons too. So that's mainly what this list of projects is, and that we will be proposing and coming to you in May.
And I think there will be an opportunity because I'm going to turn the next piece over. If you could go to the next slide on key projects to Community Development Director Lillian Daughtry.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. I wanted to provide an opportunity for an update of those projects that I know have special attention of our residents. The first project is the Santa Fe Drive Corridor Improvement Project. They're making significant progress in the design of that project and anticipate to be complete in September of this year. We do need to complete right-of-way acquisition, and given the cost of the project as we are currently projecting, we do anticipate a phase one of $2.1 million would be what we would need to progress with that portion of the study. We are happy to consider bringing this project back and look at alternatives. As this is not the subject of this evening, I'm happy to move forward or answer any questions. With respect to Birmingham Drive Complete Streets project, the design is estimated to be complete this summer as well. Some right-of-way acquisition does need to be complete, but we anticipate that acquisition will be completed in September of 2021. The construction funding amount, which includes the undergrounding of utilities, is $8.6 million. We are seeking stimulus and grant funding for the Birmingham Drive project. For the Lucadia Boulevard roundabout at Hygeia, we are completing the real estate acquisition currently. The design will be complete in May of 2021. The real estate acquisition will be complete in July of 2021, and the utilities will be complete in September. The construction funding required for that project is $2.1 million. In addition, we are progressing with Streetscape, phase 1. The next phase of Streetscape, we do plan to, we are complete with the design, and it is fully entitled. Construction funding in the amount of $47 million is the amount needed. However, we are proceeding with a phased approach. At this time, staff is recommending phase from A to Basel at the cost of $4.3 million. And we are again seeking federal stimulus funding and grant funding for those segments. Additionally, we are ready to proceed with the annual street overlay project. That will be ready to bid in July, and it is funded through Transnet and gas tax. With that, next slide, please. Another area of our community where we are aware there's significant interest is North Leucadia. So we have several activities planned for traffic and mobility improvements that do not require general fund dollars at this time. On May 12th, we will be bringing 2 items for council's direction. The first will be a Vulcan Lacosta signal for always stop control. This is an item that we will be discussing in terms of timing and how best to address issues along the Lacosta corridor. On May 12th, we will also be bringing traffic calming measures to include lane narrowing and raised crosswalks along Vulcan. We will be working on a work plan for our general mobility dollars with an intention to prioritize construction of sidewalks along Vulcan to extend connectivity of existing facilities within that corridor, as we understand that is a main concern for our residents in North Acadia. Finally, we are working with developers to ensure that they are also contributing through conditions of their projects, much needed sidewalks as we move forward with the review and recommendations of the housing element sites found in North Acadia. Next slide, please. The next high priority effort that we have been undertaking is our traffic group led by Abe Vandigan and the Rancho Santa Fe Task Force have been working on a series of recommendations, which we do plan to bring forth to council also on May 12th. The plan currently includes lane narrowing and lane shift, which would create walking space along the west side of Rancho Santa Fe Road. It includes recommendations for the studying of feasibility and design of roundabouts and the improvements, or perhaps that was misstated, but the creation of crosswalks. That would include raised crosswalks and rapid flashing beacons. And then the next slide I did want to discuss is, given the current state and the potential for stimulus funding, we wanted to bring forth just an explanation of which projects we felt would be immediately in the short term ready to seek stimulus funds, and then in the long term. So this slide presents 3 projects which we believe would be eligible for stimulus funding in this summer timeframe. So the Leucadia Boulevard Roundabout at Hygeia, given that it will be complete with real estate and shovel ready in summer. And the Streetscape project, as I mentioned, the phase from A Street to Marchetta, and the annual street overlay, which, given our ability to escalate or expand the program very quickly, we do believe that this would also be ready for stimulus funding immediately. Next slide, please. Toward the end of the calendar year, we also believe that both the Santa Fe Drive Corridor Improvement Project and the Birmingham Drive Complete Streets Project would be ready to seek stimulus funding, given the significant progress we've made with respect to design and real estate acquisition. So with that, I am ready to take any questions, either now or at your discretion. Thank you so much.
Okay, so that is the end of the slides completely. Okay. Yeah, I have several questions too, but I'm going to call on my colleagues first. So Councilmember Moscow.
Yes, so that was a lot of information, and just have a few questions. The first, for the city manager or for our finance director, can we just look at that $768,000 increase, 4.5% increase for the law enforcement? Was that part of a MOU that we all agreed to in advance? And so that's an increase that we've been expecting for some time.
So thank you, Councilmember Mosca. This is no changes to the contract agreement. This is a CPI adjustment that they are asking all of the cities to pay. The question that you asked is the same one that I have is, did we know about this, or how come it's not in our planning for the next couple of years? But my understanding from the other groups or the other cities in the contract is this is a increase that is expected.
Perfect. And really briefly, what, Teresa, our finance director, what is motivating the increase there primarily? What's the biggest pressure in moving that 4.5% up? My understanding is that it's pension liability. Can you speak to the increased pension liability at all?
Oh, okay. Thank you. Where is the 4.5% that you're referring to? Oh, you're talking about the sheriff's contract.
Oh,
yeah, he's talking about the 768. So it is in their sheriff's contract that they will do increases periodically, and this one is in our agreement, I'm told. It is in the original agreement, but this year, because of our funding, in past years, you may not have noticed it as much because of our revenue situation, but this year it kind of really stands out because of our flat revenues.
All right, maybe we can come back at some point. My understanding is that the 768,000, the 4.5% increase is really primarily because of pension liabilities that the county has sustained for the deputy sheriffs, and so pension liabilities went up sharply, which accounted for the 4.5 increase, which is higher than normal. And so maybe we can come back at some point to talk a little bit more about that item. In terms of trails, just near and dear to my heart is the Rancho Santa Fe Road Trail, the closing of that gap between El Camino del Norte to the intersection of Encinitas and Rancho Santa Fe Road. We've been working on this for a while. We programmed a couple $1 million years ago. We also have the closure of the gap on El Camino del Norte from the county line up to Rancho Santa Fe Road. We programmed some money in there for some years ago. Can you, I didn't see this in there, and so we're not intending on moving those funds anywhere else. I saw the funding for the El Camino del Norte, which is important, but to me, the one on Rancho Santa Fe Road is critically important. So want to make sure that that funding is not going anywhere.
Can you please move to slide 8? Yes, thank you. So just so I make sure I understand, Councilmember Mosca, you are asking about the item Rec Trails Development, Trail 95, El Camino del Norte, which we've programmed for $321,902.
Correct. And then there was also previously programmed was the El Camino del Norte, and also Rancho Santa Fe Road was programmed and had been programmed for years. And I think that may have been near $2 million. So I just want a confirmation that that's still programmed in there so that we're still moving forward. I know that we've hit some roadblocks with right-of-way acquisition, movement of telecom and utility above ground facilities and whatnot. But I just want to make sure that I didn't see it mentioned there. I just want to make sure that we're not redistributing those funds and that they're still there to pay for that trail.
So I'm going to ask Recreation and Parks Director Jennifer Campbell to come on. Those programming dollars were removed because of the cost of that trail. She can provide some insight into what we learned when we started to do estimates to complete that project.
Yes, thank you very much, City Manager Antel. Councilmember Mosca, so yes, you are correct. We had money budgeted for Trail 95, which is El Camino del Norte, and that was around $241,000. We also had budgeted for Trail 82, which is Rancho Santa Fe Road, $1.1 million. So through all of the planning, we are wanting to proceed with Trail 95, El Camino del Norte. However, the first bid that we went out with came in with like a $654,000 construction budget after design. We have since redesigned that a little bit to get the cost down. We're hoping it'll be about 550. So we were looking at redistributing some of the money from Trail 82 to actually finish Trail 95. The last thing we're waiting for on Trail 95 is part of the trail is in a floodway. So we have the engineer looking, it's what's called a no-rise certification, just to make sure we're okay. And if the trail has to be redesigned a little bit, we have that. But we do want to look to go out to, once we get that no-rise certification, which we are hoping to get that sometime in May, we would go out to bid in June for Trail 95 and complete that trail. What we did was, yes, $500,000 was moved out of Trail 82 to help to fund some of these other projects. To let you know, the intention for Trail 82 is we have left some money in there to go ahead and finish the design. Once the design is finished, we are able to work with the utilities. And as you know, there's several, OMWD, SDG&E, AT&T. Once we have that 100% plan design, they can then work on utility relocation, which was obviously an issue with this trail. We've obviously had a couple bumps in the road with Trail 82 as far as not getting some easements, having to redesign. There's an issue with the bridge going over the culvert. Public Works has to have maintenance of that culvert. So we are looking at still some redesign, but we would like to finish the design on 82, look to have utilities do relocation. The other thing my staff and I are looking at is now that Olympus Park is almost done and completed, we are looking at using park development and acquisition funds to go ahead and do part of Trail 82. We're currently looking to see where the funds have been brought in, the impact fees, to see if we can use that. We have identified that part of that trail is considered a low service area, and that's one of the main stipulations for using that. So hopefully if we can use those development funds, we're looking at possibly $700,000 or $800,000 over the next 3 years to bring that in. The other thing my staff is looking at is we are trying to look for some different grants that might be able to fund that project. But the estimated cost for building Trail 82 is around $4 million. So we're going to have to kind of regroup, look at grants, look at park acquisition and development. But we do want to finish the design and move forward with utility conflict relocation.
But just to be clear, Councilmember Mosca, there is no money budgeted for Trail 82
construction
beyond the design.
So I wish that we would have had a conversation about this previously and not tonight, right, in public meeting. But this is really disappointing news. I was thinking I was confirming the fact that we're moving forward on this. You know, it's really it's not setting proper expectation. Both these trails were programmed years ago. And we've been talking about constructing them and building them out. We've been giving presentations for years to local neighborhood groups and neighborhood councils and all kinds of stuff. And so I just think that this is really not setting proper expectations. And you know, I understand that 82, the trail along Rancho Santa Fe Road, is so critically important. I mean, it is so critically important. I mean, you know, I think I would have yielded El Camino del Norte before I would yield Rancho Santa Fe Road. That is, if you see it today, there's so many people that are out in that area walking and biking, and they're forced to walk in the road. And so it is such a critical trail. I'm happy that we're moving forward with El Camino del Norte, but I'm really disappointed that we're not, you know, that we haven't made more progress in resolving these land use issues. And that we haven't talked about the price tag. This is the first time I've heard it's $4 million. That's the first time I've heard that. So I gotta say, I'm gonna move on to some other questions, but that is really disappointing, and I wish I would have heard this earlier.
To be fair, Councilmember Mosca, this is all very fluid information. And when we program money in a CIP, it shows up on a spreadsheet, but it doesn't mean that it's funded. So part of the process of these capital improvement programs, especially in trails and other acquisitions, those types of things, the cost of construction is what we're trying to determine. So now was the year that we went through the design, and part of that process is to learn what the total cost of the project was. So whatever was thought to be a number several years ago. So for example, if you want to fund the 4 million, you can, but it means that there's other projects you would have to decide what other projects could not be funded. It's not like we're taking the $4 million and putting it towards something else. There isn't the $4 million to build the trail, is what I'm saying.
Sir, and thank you for that explanation. But I do think that we need to be we need to be careful in how we assess these projects, because otherwise we will be starting lots of studies and not ever able to finish any project, and that is really not good in terms of expectations for the residents. I'm going to move on to my questions, but I thank you for that explanation. But I do am disappointed there. In terms of Pacific View School, you said we have $1 million in that account that we've set aside for that, and I've heard that some of the numbers have come back different. I think that earlier we heard that it's going to cost about $1 million to get this, or $1.5 million to get the school to a point where it could be used properly by the community. And so it's so what is the amount right now that it would take to get the school up and running and used?
So I'll start, and then Jennifer Campbell, if you want to jump in. So several years ago, I think that the intention by a group of folks, the EACEA, had thought it would be somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million. And our staff in Public Works had thought that at some time ago as well. And again, similar, and it's very disappointing, but when you actually bring people in to estimate the work in these types of, especially older buildings, I think this was built sometime in the 1950s. The kind of back of the napkin is closer to $3 to $4 million. And one of the reasons why we didn't put it on a slide today is because our staff is still working very hard to try to get at what would that number be. I do believe it will be more than $1 million. But I want to give Ms. Campbell some time to meet with all of the interested parties, which I believe she's doing on April 19th, and we'll bring back a separate item to council indicating whether or not we think that $1 million is even going to be usable this year.
All right, I think that that's an important topic, because we're talking about some projects that people that are already kind of designed and or people have been talking about for a while. If there's $1 million sitting there and it's going to cost $3 to $4 million, I think we need to have a plan on how we're going to close that gap, and not just let $1 million sit there and not have a plan to close that gap. And so I look forward to more conversation with that. In terms of the line item for City Council redistricting, you talked about that this was a cost that was borne by the city previously. But when we had moved to districts before, it was a special situation. We were being sued, and the law allowed us to move fairly quickly. This time, the city may want to look to its residents to perhaps have a redistricting commission or committee. We may want to do some sort of something different than what we've done previously. So there's the 200,000, does that assume that we may actually involve the public in a much broader way than we have in the past?
It does not. It's the 160 to 180 that was spent the last time around is mostly, and I'll ask Jay Schwarm to jump on in a moment as well, was mostly the cost borne for attorney services and demographer for the process of designing the districts. And I think you had an open process where people could come in and submit a map, et cetera. Should the council decide to go with a citizens commission, The estimates, the going estimate for that is about 4 to 440 because those meetings will all need to be facilitated. And other cities that have done that have indicated to us that that's about what they've estimated that it costs them to do that. So I hear what you're saying about a citizens group. The citizens group doesn't always cost us less money. Sometimes it costs us more. And so that'll be one of the choices that you'll have and you'll discuss. And Jace, please jump on if there's something that I've misstated in some way, but that's what my thought process was when we talked earlier.
And this is Jace, that is accurate, everything the city manager went on. There is additional requirements that will be required under the new redistricting laws, and it does affect the cost. The cost does have a little bit of cushion for an increase in hourly rates, et cetera, for both the demographer and the attorney. So the 220 envisions a council-directed redistricting. As Pam indicated, the city manager, that should it be a commission, there's 2 or 3 ways you can do a commission. And like other cities, they're budgeting around 400 plus.
All right. Circulate, just a couple questions real fast and I'll be done. Circulation element, it looks like it's programmed at 50,000. This is an important task. Are we paying for this? I thought it was like $500,000 or $600,000 task. Are we paying for this in different line items or are we just not doing it?
So your circulation element was budgeted in this year's budget. So I will ask Lillian to jump on this last 50,000 that we are asking for in your next fiscal year budget.
Yes, so thank you, Pam. Thank you, Councilmember Mosca. This 50,000 is for outreach at the conclusion of the contracts. The contract was awarded this fiscal year, and it is well underway. So there were a few items, including mailings and final outreach that were needed to conclude once the contract wraps up. So that is the 50,000 needed for those mailings and outreach.
All right, Lillian, I'm glad that you're there too. Just one more question. In terms of the RSF road, Rancho Santa Fe Road Task Force, glad to hear you say that that the improvements, it's not actual improvements, but it's actual installation, because we only have one crosswalk in the 1.5 mile or so of Rancho Santa Fe Road in Olivenheim. We only have one crosswalk, and that's up at La Posta. And nothing else throughout the corridor. And so we're not actually improving crosswalks, we're installing crosswalks. Also, you had in parentheses, you had e.g., for example, and just want to make sure that it's not, when you say, for example, raised crosswalk, that was just one raised crosswalk at Morning Sun with on-demand crossing. But all of the other crossings are just essentially painting crosswalks in there. They're not raised crosswalks unless the staff is recommending that. But what the task force was recommending were painted crosswalks, continentals in there. So it's quite different than a raised crosswalk, which would be a lot more money. But just want to note that because you had kind of, for example, as if all the crosswalks were being requested at raised crosswalk style.
Thank you for that clarification, Councilmember. You're absolutely right. Just given that at this time the staff is still reviewing the report, I didn't want to provide the clear details about what would be reported, just examples of the types of things. But you're absolutely the current report recommends painted crosswalks.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, and thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yes. Okay. Deputy Mayor Crayons.
Yes, thank you. So on that last subject of the task force, Rancho Santa Fe Road, just to clarify, we did receive a number of emails advocating for the installation of crosswalks and some other things. And those all sound like reasonable, fairly low-hanging fruit, as they say. And I know that this project came from Councilmember Mosca's council-initiated item to establish a group and to be funded to do some studies and get some staff support, but we still haven't seen this at the city council. So I wonder about having it in this conversation now. Is there a number that's going to be associated with this, or it just has to wait until May 12th and we put a slide in to kind of hold it as a place marker?
So, and I will ask Lillian to jump in too, but so what we did is we were receiving quite a few emails from 2 distinct areas of the city. And so what we tried to do is at least put some information, but more information will come on May 12th. But much of the work that we would be planning to do at Rancho Santa Fe, and even some of the work in North Leucadia, would be from some of our other funds, not in competition with any of these CIP projects on page 8. But I can never remember all of the names of all of those funds, ATP, TDA, whatever. So Lillian can opine on some of those.
So yes, our plan is to look more closely at the Rancho Santa Fe study, look at the needs within North Leucadia, and identify the general mobility funds that we have available and how best we can utilize those funds, and make recommendations to council with that in mind, acknowledging that there are many needs within the city, more than just these 2 areas. So we want to make sure that we are being thoughtful and considering our planning documents and other items to make sure that we are making a solid recommendation on May 12th.
And to be clear on this spreadsheet here that we see on the screen, these new items, how did they get onto this list? I recognize that some of them might be just kind of emergency, like the San Diego Bridge pavement failure repair. I could see that would essentially have to come on the list. And some of these pedestrian improvements on Highway 101, I don't remember ever talking about those. And for example, the stormwater feasibility study in the Nardo area. So the new projects, I'm interested in how they got on the list. And then I see North Leucadia rail crossing study is identified as tier 2 and all the rest are at tier 1. I assume after we hear public comments, we're gonna have more discussion about the tiering and these projects that are on this list. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yes, you're correct in that assumption. The tiers came from whatever the tier system was last year. So if it's listed as 2, it was 2 last year, but it made the list. And then I'll let Lillian talk a little bit about the new projects. You are correct, Councilmember Kranz, that some of them have come up as a part of safety issues, and then others, as we were getting towards the end of the looking at how much we had available, some of them were things that had not been thought of before, but had been brought up by council throughout the year. But again, Lillian, you can provide some more detail on that.
Yes. So with respect to the Beacons Beach parking lot and the San Alejo Bridge, those are emergency projects. We are starting to see failures in those areas. So that public health and safety was our #1 consideration. Following that, there are 2 new projects that are listed. And that is because the city was fortunate enough to receive well over $2 million worth in grant funding. And our match is a small amount, which is $200,000 is what we need. So with respect to the walkway to Solana Beach, that project includes, the project is to build a retaining wall and add a sidewalk on the west side of South Coast Highway 101 between the Cardiff State Beach parking lot and the city limits to connect to a sidewalk that currently exists in Solana Beach. The grant covers the design and construction cost up to about $790,000, and our city match is $132,000. It's actually, we added a little bit more because we did feel like we needed a little bit of contingency in that amount. So the required match is about $80,000, but we added some money just to make sure we would have enough to complete the project based on our current city estimates. Additionally, we have a...
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Another project that we received grant funding for through the state was a project from Coast Highway 101 separated bike lanes. from Swami's to Chesterfield. It should be mobility improvements, and I apologize for that misstatement. The project is to improve safety and mobility by implementing traffic calming measures and enhancing bicycle and pedestrian facilities along Coast Highway 101 between the Swami's pedestrian crossing and Chesterfield traffic signal, lane narrowing and restriping, median modification, potential class 2 and class 4, bikeways, pedestrian enhancements are some of the aspects of the project, and the grant covers design and construction costs up to $720,000, and the city's required match is $72,210. We did, I apologize, Councilmember Kranz. I did just want to mention that we also received an additional $1.2 million, but that is for traffic signal upgrades, and there is no match required. So that is not included because it is fully grant funded.
Okay, thanks. And so looking at this walkway to Solana Beach, it reminds me that it's a little hairy down on the south end of that stretch where pedestrians use the coastal rail trail in Solana Beach, which is on the east side of Highway 101 and then they cross over Highway 101 to get to the west side. And my hope is that staff is looking at what it would take to install some sort of, raised crosswalk. I don't know, some pedestrian improvements at that point, because it does strike me as a pretty dangerous situation. So I hope we're looking at that. One item to clarify here on slide number 9, there where it says Leucadia Streetscape next phase, it says staff recommends phase A to Basil. And is that A Street to Basil, or what is phase A?
I sincerely apologize. That is another error. It should have been A Street to Marchetta.
A Street to Marchetta, so not Basil. And that's the 4.3 million that we're looking to get as possible stimulus through the earmarking programs that Congress has apparently decided to allow our representatives to take advantage of. And this has been submitted to Congressman Levin, I believe. Is that correct?
That is correct.
When do we know whether that will be, an earmark that is approved?
At this time, we are uncertain about when we are going to hear, as I understand, still in deliberations about the stimulus.
That is the $4.3 million question.
Yes, it is.
We hope to know something in the next few weeks. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have a couple questions. Are you finished, Councilmember Kranz? Yeah. Okay. I have a couple questions. I don't see any other hands up from my council colleagues, but so why is it that we are not submitting for stimulus money through council or through Congressman Levin for the entirety of Streetscape?
So the request that we received from our lobbyist, and we may actually do that when the stimulus bill is released. So there's two things that are happening right now. The American Recovery Act, which is money that we have been notified that we should be receiving over a 2-year period, 8.89 million, and that'll come in 2 chunks. They have not released the regulations related to those dollars yet. At the outset, they had indicated that if cities use that money for capital, it could only be for water, wastewater, and broadband equity. And water and wastewater does not include stormwater. So we're still waiting for the results of that. At the same time, Congress is working on a stimulus bill, and there could be a number of dollars available to us in that stimulus bill, but it hasn't passed yet, and they haven't released any regulations on it yet. But what they did do is they've allotted a certain percentage for each congressional district. And Congressman Levin's office reached out and indicated to us that they were looking for a $2 to $3 million project that was shovel ready. And so we submitted this piece of streetscape because we knew it was shovel ready, but there was this is for the earmark portion of the congressional funding of that bill. And it was the only thing that we were allowed to submit at this time through the congressman's office. But we are closely monitoring all of those, but that's all we have for right now.
Okay. I have a couple things on these sheets that are less important to me. And maybe I will save those comments, but I just, in the big picture, want to say that the documents that were being provided today ask for almost 2 million in operational requests and almost 5 million in CIP projects. So that's almost $7 million. And we're not dealing with the two major CIP projects, financially dealing with the two major CIP projects that we have spent a lot of time and energy talking about, which are Leucadia Streetscape and Pacific View. And so to me, it seemed there's a real disconnect there that I really am struggling with. I think when we're talking about our budget and all of these items, some of these things are clearly legally required, like an ADA upgrade to a curb ramps. But Glen Park ADA project for 300,000. Like, I've never heard of that. I've never heard anyone complain about that. If that's not legally required, that 300,000 would not be my priority. So in some ways, when we're talking about where is it we're going to put CIP money, but we're not dealing with those two big projects, I just really think that's an oversight. And then I'll also say that I want to second the concerns raised by my colleague, Councilmember Mosca, which I think were true and really, really troubling, that there are things that we have been budgeting for that have been removed from this budget without our knowledge.
Just to be clear, Mayor, they were not budgeted. They were put into a CIP plan with the hope that there would be money to budget, but they were not actually budgeted. We haven't redirected $4 million. There was never $4 million there for that trail.
Okay, but
that's true of several of the projects that people have asked about throughout the course of the year. That there's a CIP program is something that you do as a work plan, but it makes assumptions, and those assumptions don't always come to fruition in terms of revenues. Yeah.
So when I'm looking at the sheet in front of me right here that has proposed for 2022, 2023, and it goes out, those ones that are carrying forward, those are similarly proposed and we're planning them, right? So like beacon staircase access at Grandview and Swami's, or climate mitigation measures, or whatever these ones that are go out. If for some reason you stripped out that money, I would think that the decision makers would want to know that and to be able to say yes or no to that. Because my expectation when we put in a line item for 300,000 of general mobility improvements every year was that it was going to stay there, not that it was going to be stripped out.
It is there. That
I know. But what I'm saying is that the process of stripping out things like for Rancho Santa Fe Road Trail, which has been something that has been really important to this council without us knowing about it and moving it over to another Rancho Santa Fe Road project, to me, that's not a process that works because of the expectation, although it was not budgeted, it was on future agendas, it was on future line items that were proposed. And so we have to make that decision. I think we should be told, like Councilmember Mosca said, and we should say, we agree that this should be removed from here and put over there.
That's the purpose of this meeting. This purpose of this meeting is this is our best recommendation for the monies that you have this year. If you would like to go back and redirect money, you can. What needs to happen though is you need to take, for example, in that one, you would have to take $4 million off of this list and put it back into a trail, because while we looked at the planning, and the other thing that I noticed is that some of the planning in the CIP projects are based on estimates when that was put in maybe 10 years ago. So somebody thought 10 years ago that it might be $1 million. Well, it's not $1 million, it's $4 million. And so when we get that information, that's one of the things that the staff is working at really hard on is two things. One, what are the real costs of these programs or these projects? And then number two, should we be putting an inflationary measure on outgoing years so that you can see that the amount of money that's needed is more than what was maybe anticipated 10 years ago when somebody came up with the concept of a project.
Okay. I mean, when we come back to this, I'm going to be asking to see a document that shows everything that was defunded, because I feel like that needs to be presented publicly, everything that was defunded. So if you want to show, you know, a line item that has the red through it or shows before and after or whatever, but it, you know, the change is happening without seeing it, I still find troubling. And I recognize this is your first budget, right? So maybe this is the way you have done it in other cities or whatever. But I do, you know, Councilmember Mosca brought this up around that project. But what I'm thinking in my mind is, oh my gosh, how many other projects are like that I don't know about? Because it happened, and if he hadn't asked that question and it wasn't in his district and a priority for him, it would never have come up. And that's the problem here. So, and I'll also just say, like, there are things on here, like the point of tonight is to talk about some of the stuff on here that staff is asking for. And so, you know, I want to be able to have the time and opportunity to say, like, why are we putting $500,000 into our housing element update when we've just approved a housing element update on time, and we don't want to hire consultants every single year for that kind of money? You know, like to have those, because these are your asks. So I assume that this is what you think you need as a city, and it adds up to 4.9 million. So, you know, so that's money that's not going to other stuff because there was a decision to move it. So, you know, I think we do have a lot of public comments, and I think we'll probably come back to that. But I think that the city council needs to make the decision in the big picture about the projects we've already committed to, at least in the sense that we've talked about them year after year. So the Rancho Santa Fe Trail is in that category, Leucadia Streetscape is in that category, and Pacific View is in that category. And I know we do not have the money to do all these things. I know that these are not going to be easy decisions, but I think we need to have them, and we need to have them at this period because this is the beginning of our 2-year budget where we look ahead. And so making those choices about what's the most important thing, especially when we're going to hear a lot of public comments that say, we have a lot of new things we want to add to this, La Costa Avenue improvements and undercrossing in Northwest Leucadia and other things that, and all of the Rancho Santa Fe Road Task Force asks, you know, which could end up being substantial. You know, we need to be able to have a handle on what our existing is. And I don't feel like this document is providing that because of those big holes. So
could somebody go back to slide, I think one easy way to look at it is if you go to slide 5, whoever's in control of the screen, or I'm sorry, slide 6. So the portion in orange, and again, you know, the outward years are a little hard. The portion in orange is what you will have every year to throw into new operations in CIP. So you could, and that's part of the reason why we did this discussion tonight, is that if you want to include the trail, you could say that we are going to put 1.1 million and set it aside for the next 4 years to pay for that trail. But then, like anything else, or for streetscape, when you have such a large dollar amount that you still need to fund, you can see that with this 3.8 in 23-24, the 4.5 in 24-25, that there's not enough money to do those large projects. So in the prior years, there were a number of years that I think there wasn't a lot of projects being done, and there was quite a large amount of unallocated fund balance. If you go to the slide just prior to this, please, you can see that that's where you were able in 16-17 and again in 18-19 to put a tremendous amount of funding into capital. I think what was lost on a lot of people is that once you spent that those reserves were spent down. So we don't have a chunk of 10 or 15 million to infuse into capital. I think the other issue is that when you do a CIP plan, you know, all throughout the plan, it talks about how, and I get it that people don't always understand this in the public, but it doesn't mean that there's funding for any of those projects. So you absolutely can direct us to reformulate this list. I have an obligation to give you what we think is the best use of the funding, kind of trying to say, well, we have $100,000 here, let's put it here, let's put it there. But you're absolutely able to move things around. And then just recognize, though, next slide, that this is what you're looking at in terms of a dollar value that you're going to have available.
Right.
And I'm sorry to be the person to be kind of the bearer of the bad news on this, but I mean, this is what we have. So, and the yellow portion, the 2.3, the 2.2, the 1.6, that is the amount that you put into capital every year for ADA curb ramps and $300,000 in mobility projects. So we put that in. I mean, you can always play with that as well.
Right. Yeah, I just think we need to be able to honestly communicate with the public about what's practical and reasonable. And I mean, it is that issue of expectations. And so when we've been talking about a Rancho Santa Fe Road Trail or Leucadia Streetscape for years, and then we have another budget cycle that doesn't deal with it. And I mean, it doesn't daylight it. Like I understand the difficulties of not having enough money. But I just think we need to be able to wrestle with that as a council and say, we're not making progress on those big CIP projects that we told our community that we were going to, and we just don't have the money to do that. But then the recognition that the addition of new projects is going to be even more difficult. And I think it's worth repeating that we don't want to just start a lot of planning projects that we don't. I mean, we know we have major planning projects both on Birmingham and Santa Fe, right, which are also projects that are unfunded. So, you know, it just, there's a reality to this that I think we have to have all the projects on the table at the same time. So anyway, we'll come back, you know, we're going to come back to this because I am going to be asking to see a list of all defunded line items.
Just to be clear though, we haven't defunded anything. You're funding projects now. If somebody could pull up in the appendix, the slide for the projects that we did not have funding for this year. That's completed. These were the projects that we did not have funding in this year. And so, as you can see, there are some, you could move some around, and some of the lower ticket items are additional studies that get you to the design, et cetera. But this remains our problem, is some of the ones that are the highest priority for council are the ones that we don't have that cash on hand to be able to fund those projects.
I appreciate seeing this slide here because it puts together some of the projects together. I mean, Pacific View is still not on there, but yeah. Okay. Okay. Do council member Hinsey or Lyons want to have any questions before we go to the public comments?
I'll wait until after public comments.
Okay.
I'll wait until after public comments too.
Okay. Okay, great. Let's go to the public comments.
Okay, our first speaker is June Hansberger. She's here. Oh, she was here. Oh, there she is. June, you can start when ready.
Hi, Karen has a video that I've pre-recorded. It's a slideshow.
Okay. Karen, can you start the video thank you. And I'm going to set the timer.
And I'm here to ask for some funding for Northwest Leucadia. first priority tonight is that I ask for you to make Tier 1 funding available for a safe rail crossing in Northwest Leucadia between La Costa Avenue and Leucadia Boulevard. Please include a feasibility and construction funding to make a crossing a reality. We currently have no safe crossings in this section. And in fact, if you look at the picture, a fence is being installed on the west side of the tracks, and we have signs that are say no trespassing, and we are threatened with $500 fines. Below is what we have in Leucadia. We've got trash, mud, and weeds, but what we really need is to the right. The bottom picture shows an at-grade crossing, or above that is the undercrossing right here in town. So either possibility would be great. We just need a crossing in Northwest Leucadia. Next is we all mobility along Vulcan. When you look south along Vulcan in this picture, you can see that we don't have a trail or bike lanes. We just have trash and weeds. And then off to the right is showing a section of San Elijo Avenue that has a walking and biking trail, but all other sections of Vulcan and San Elijo have bike lanes and walking trails, and even Highway 101 does too, but we lack this. The next thing I want to just look at is mobility in and out of our neighborhood. It is really difficult to enter and exit our neighborhoods here, and here are the only two ways in off of La Costa. And what you can see this image is showing is that there are 5 new developments all along La Costa Avenue. The hotel is already in right here. We have all of these new developments right along La Costa, and it is just a bottleneck. What we are seeing here is the traffic from just yesterday along La Costa Avenue in this picture. And this arrow is pointing to how traffic comes up along Vulcan Avenue and is trying to turn out onto La Costa. And it is just amazingly difficult to cross in a car, and it's almost impossible on a bike or foot. It's a narrow curving road without a bike lane or a sidewalk, and it lacks a crosswalk or a signal. That a signal has already been designed, and it includes sidewalks and a left-hand turn lane. So I'm asking you to please fund and install a light at Vulcan and La Costa Avenue. So lastly, asking to fund the design and installation of a rail crossing in Northwest Leucadia and help with our other mobility needs. We want trails and safe roads and rail crossings, not just fences. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council.
Okay, our next speaker is Christine Schindler. Let's see if she is still here.
All right, Christine Schindler, again, East Encinitas. I am very much impressed by the CIP, the list of projects, and so I just wanted to acknowledge a few. Very much appreciate that you're continuing to fund $500,000 each cycle for safe routes to school, park improvements, and traffic calming. So this is what I always say. So in addition to infrastructure, I just want you to always be thinking, staff, always be thinking of non-infrastructure education and encouragement campaigns. I just reported to my friends in Solana Beach about the new item that was been added for the walkway to address that gap between Cardiff and Solana Beach. So happy to see that on the list. I continue to learn, so doing a study for the North Leucadia rail crossing on a very straight stretch of road with a high visibility sight lines with other at-grade crossings in the region. I have to understand why that's $400K, but I'm glad it's on the list and it's something important to do. I think what I heard Lillian say earlier is that they had missed putting bike in addition to pedestrian for the improvements that are going to be made from Highway 101 Swamis to Chesterfield, because I think that is both a bike and ped improvement project. So thank you for that. That's a segment that we've been looking to have improvements on for quite some time. Highly utilized. It would be good to have more of the pavement dedicated to bicycles. So thank you, and pedestrians. And Tony, Councilmember Crayons, thank you so much for bringing up needing a ped crossing in South Cardiff, north end of Solana Beach. I have literally for a decade been talking to council at Solana Beach about doing something there. And so I made sure that I followed up with them to get the latest. I know that there's been communication around that, having a safe pedestrian crossing. People are doing it all the time. They're not going to stop doing it. So now that you're addressing that gap and people are going to be using that corridor even more for walking, I appreciate you bringing that up. My best with this all, and good to have the new city manager on board, and good luck with finalizing the budget. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Patricia Vasquez.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank Lillian Doherty and the Planning Department for paying attention to Northwest Leucadia along Vulcan. I would like to point out, however, some oversights relative to traffic and public safety in the La Costa Avenue and 101 corridor as you look at the CIP budget. As you're already aware, this is an area where dense development continues at a frightening rate. And as a reminder, La Costa Avenue west of the I-5 is a residential street with many home fronts and driveways. It is extremely dangerous for pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorists, given the LOS rating of F in sections of this road, a lack of sidewalks combined with high speeds. It is also the only legal way for us to cross the railroad tracks for 1.5 miles north or south of that point. My neighbors and I are already suffering from the increased danger and traffic backup that resulted from the opening of the Alila Maria Hotel. We'd like to request the urgent attention given by City Council to addressing sidewalks and traffic infrastructure improvements on this corridor to make Northwest Leucadia safer, particularly with all the planned development coming our way. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is, let's see, I do not see Diana. So let's move to Michael von Neumann. Michael, you can start when ready.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Michael von Neumann. I'm a resident of Encinitas. As you review the funding, timelines, and priorities of the capital improvement projects, which are all important and needed, please consider what would increase safety for alternative modes of transportation that can be done quickly and for the least amount of money. The Leucadia Streetscape is one of the city's longest planned and most impactful projects. While the first phase of the streetscape between Marchetta Street and Basil Street is funded and now underway, the remaining phases may be years away, unless the city does go ahead and borrow money to do all the phases at the same time, which was an original plan. The part of streetscape with the most impact for improving safety is reducing the travel lanes for cars and trucks from 2 to 1 in each direction and the installation of Class 2 buffered bike lanes. This is being done in the first phase already. The remaining sections of the road need not have to wait for these safety improvements. Through the simple application of paint on the pavement, the remaining sections can be restriped for 1 travel lane and 1 Class 2 buffered bike lane, both north and south now. Restriping the existing roadway may also allow for other improvements, such as reverse angle parking and temporary traffic circles where roundabouts have been planned and space currently allows. This would yield the majority of safety benefits long planned for the streetscape project in the shortest amount of time with the least effort and definitely the lowest cost. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Our next speaker is Kathleen Lees.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. Ms. Antil, Kathleen Lees, I live in Leucadia. First, I want to thank you all for seeing the urgency in having the city accept responsibility for getting Pacific View into functional condition. I've always supported the city's purchase of Pacific View, and thank you, Tony. I think you're the only one left on council that actually had a hand in doing that. And we purchased it to be used as an art center, and the time has come to do what needs to be done so we can get it up and running. Still, it's important to have it running in the right direction. Once you hired Jim Gillian, we all began to see what an extensive arts community we have in Encinitas. It was clear when we purchased Pacific View that it should be developed into a creative arts center for that robust arts community. Pacific View was purchased to serve the arts community as a center for the arts, and I encourage you to direct that it be used solely for that purpose. As a member of the Arts Commission and the board, and also on the board of the Encinitas Friends of the Arts, I am aware of what a dynamic and diverse resource we have to draw on. The arts community may be polite and soft-spoken, but they excel at making do with what they have to work with, making it functional, and of course, always beautiful. They are so creative, incredibly generous, and they work well together. The property may look humble now, but Pacific View is a jewel in our crown. It can be the cornerstone of an arts district, and in the future, as it expands, a focus of economic development. It already has a cadre of dedicated workers that will do whatever they can to make it successful. In the meantime, once it's available, Pacific View can provide the very important arts and culture education that has been dropped from many of the schools. Workrooms and classrooms and studios that provide education and the opportunity to learn and hone skills in the arts and technological crafts such as pottery, glass cutting, woodworking, even drafting or fashion design and construction. Music, dance, theater classes, and performances all will thrive at Pacific View. Of course, all this needs to be organized. We await your decision about how you want to move forward. Please allow it to stay focused on the arts and allow the arts community to be part of whatever you decide to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Our next speaker is Carol Heil. Carol, you can start when ready. Carol, you just need to oh, there you go.
Yeah, hi. Good evening, City Council. I'd like to speak about two different items tonight. The first is the much needed rail crossing in Leucadia. As a member of Now Leucadia, we've assembled, organized, and advocated for a rail crossing between Leucadia Boulevard and La Costa Avenue for well over a year. The reality is that Leucadia residents have been asking for a rail crossing for over 3 decades. In fact, monies were allocated for a design of a crossing as a condition when the Santa Fe crossing was built in 2013. Mobility studies showed that crossings were in the queue in Northwest Leucadia as early as 2007. Residents have organized for this cause and have disbanded by frustration and inaction by the city for many years. And many of these residents are now members of Now Leucadia. So with the onslaught of major developments proposed and the fence that is currently being installed in our corridor, it is now more imperative that residents and visitors have a way to access beaches, businesses, parks, bus lines, and streetscape safely and legally. Obstructing pedestrian travel across the tracks after 75+ years of crossing as a prescriptive easement should warrant a right to cross for pedestrian and cyclists, again, safely and legally. Now more than any other time in the history of Leucadia, it is time for the council, planning departments, and rail authorities to accomplish a design for a shovel-ready crossing in our corridor, and that it be an immediate priority. Please find a way to put this on Tier 1, and please consider all our alternatives for funding the design and construction of a rail crossing. The second item is the much needed signal at the corner of Vulcan and La Costa Avenues. At the traffic meeting the other night, we learned that an all-way stop would be installed at the Vulcan and La Costa intersection. Residents were under the impression that a design for a signal was already funded and that the signal was the appropriate solution. Please install the signal. The all-way stop is a mistake, especially while the 1967 Vulcan project located directly on this intersection is moving forward with 73 units. The traffic on La Costa is already backing up to Highway 5. I don't see how an all-way stop is the correct solution. This corridor needs some serious and sophisticated planning. The 5 major developments going in on this stretch will overburden the roads and traffic flow. A signal that is coordinated in timing with the signal at 101 and La Costa would help with the flow. Council members, I want to thank you for all that you do and thank you for consideration of these 2 items.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Annika Walden.
Good evening, esteemed council and Honorable Mayor Blakespear. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of Leucadia 101 Main Street to urge you to fully fund the Leucadia streetscape phases and follow through with your oath to see this project through in a single-phased manner. We encourage the city to seek financing and commit to completing a project that is currently underway and has momentum. For over 15 years, our volunteer-led board of directors have been advocating for Leucadia streetscape. You have seen 4 separate executive directors before you. You have read hundreds of letters of support, yet here we are today, once again, discussing Leucadia streetscape as an agenda item. It is time that our city council takes a bet on itself. Other coastal cities have managed to complete their streetscapes, and so can we. We have known for years now that our city does not have the cash to build a project of this caliber, and that financing is our best option. Let's go. Interest rates are an all-time low, and property values in Encinitas are skyrocketing. Furthermore, we are currently on the road, have communication agencies working around the clock, and have community support. Unlike any other infrastructure projects in front of you today, Leucadia streetscape will generate income from our city for years to come. We understand that this project has the largest price tag, but it also has the highest yield of return. Thank you for your time, and we really hope to see Leucadia streetscape fully funded and completed. Our community deserves it. Thank you for your time.
Next speaker is Judy Burlfine.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So thank you all for your tough job. I've been listening to this whole meeting and I only heard someone once say that we're just coming out of a pandemic. So I think we have to give all of ourselves a little slack. We don't have as much money as we used to have. And we have a lot of amazing projects and you guys have a really, really hard job to pick which ones we'll go forward with. And I know you'd love to go forward with all of them. So I am super lucky that I live near the Santa Fe underpass and I've seen amazing projects go in with the rail trail and the underpass and the library. So I want to support the folks in Leucadia, whatever you can do to make 101 safer in Leucadia, whatever you can do to move a crossing along, whatever you can do to make Vulcan and La Costa safer in the least expensive way, because I understand the money just isn't there. So thank you to our city manager. Thank you to our mayor and our city council and our staff. You have a really tough job and I am so grateful to all of you that you do this job. That's it.
Thank you, Judy. Our next speaker is Allison Wilachowski.
Good evening, Mayor Blakespear and City Council members. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the Cardiff 101 Main Street Board. I want to emphasize our support for 3 specific projects within the Cardiff community, as well as an additional safety and ADA compliant project request. The first project Cardiff 101 supports is the Verde Undercrossing project. We believe the project provides mobility east to west and vice versa as a safe way for pedestrians to access the beach without resorting to walking on the train tracks. Between Santa Fe Drive and Chesterfield Drive, there is no access east to west. This is a midpoint between those two crossing points, and we hope you will consider moving forward with this project. The second project is the Santa Fe Corridor Improvements Project. This project provides safer bike lanes, sidewalks, lighting, and accessibility for people trying to reach the school, hospital, church, and grocery stores located on Santa Fe Drive. Finishing the stretch of road with the already improved roundabout and undercrossing completes the project from Vulcan to El Camino Real. We support the completion of that project as well. The third project I am mentioning is the Birmingham Drive Complete Streets project, which will provide sidewalks, safer driving with a roundabout, undergrounding power lines, as well as water access for the mostly completed rail trail. Without the ability to maintain the landscaping, the rail trail is not fully completed. This project provides multimodal means of accessibility to our downtown district east of the 5 by walking, biking, or driving. It also provides stormwater infrastructure management to occur. And we hope within the near future, this council will consider funding this specific project completely. The final support I'm requesting this council to consider is working to create ADA compliant accessible curb ramps throughout the downtown area of Cardiff. Birmingham to Chesterfield and from San Alejo to Newcastle is defined as the Cardiff Business District. This area is in desperate need of safer ways for people to easily walk around the downtown area. We hope that there is potential to find additional CIP funding for this from the city, ADA grants, federal stimulus funding, or to fast track these projects due to the need for accessibility. We hope you take the time to consider the importance of these projects to make our community within the city of Encinitas a better, safer place to live and work. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And then our final speaker is Kevin Doyle.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello, everyone. I know everyone here. Joy, I haven't really met, but I know you by reputation. My name is Kevin Doyle, Planning Commissioner for the last 4 years and board member for the Leucadia Main Street Association for the last 16 years. Been serving as president for the last 2. I'm here to talk about, I noticed the staff report, we're dealing with funds on hand, and I feel that that's a short-sighted decision at this point. I mean, funding opportunities interests are at an all-time low. Construction costs are going up and will certainly continue to go up. And we've got a great credit rating. And so we've actually managed to make this through this last year. And somebody mentioned, we haven't mentioned the pandemic, but the pandemic has been a reality. It's been a rough year and a half for us. And but we are coming out of it. And as you know, large infrastructure projects don't happen overnight. They happen over the course of years. And rather than wait until we're officially out of it and then look at moving ahead with some of our projects, I feel we'll miss the boat. We'll have a lot of our construction costs will skyrocket even further. Interest rates may or may not stay at this low rate. It's not really safe to assume they will. I'm looking specifically at the North Leucadia Streetscape project, which is unusual. It's different from all our other CIP projects in that it actually has the potential to generate income. When we built the original downtown Encinitas streetscape 20 plus years ago now, sales tax revenue doubled over the course of the next few years. Property values also escalated, which meant property taxes escalated. Every time an old lot is redone to a new project, we make additional income. So this is a project I think that while it may or may not pay for itself entirely, but it could pay for a significant loan. And I'm going to urge you to at least consider this because looking at the report, it was not considered, and that made me uncomfortable. Now, the second thing is at Planning Commission, we formed a subcommittee to look at the La Costa corridor, specifically from Interstate 5 to the North Coast Highway 101. Now, as you know, we've entitled or near entitling several large residential and commercial projects at either end of this stretch. And while there are things that could happen here, I mean, I know Traffic Commission recently put forward a recommendation for an all-way stop sign at Vulcan and La Costa. It's not really addressing the main concern. I worry about the cars. It's a bad road for cars. It's an even worse road for people. And there's a lot of people who are now going to be, we're driving them towards all of these new amenities, these attractive nuisances. People are going to want to go to the hotel. If Maria Village gets approved as designed, there's going to be another commercial center where people are on the Leucadia side are going to want to get across the tracks down there. And so we need to carve that out as a separate project. We could, if we wanted, kind of take
Kevin,
over.
that's your 3 minutes. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
I'm sorry about that. I'll just quickly say, if we cannot move forward with a big project on this, I would like to see either an interim fix put in place, paint on the road, and if we can't do that, I would definitely like to see at least an unfunded line item that will stay on the CIP list so we can continue discussing this. Thank you very much.
Mayor, that does conclude speakers.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Hensy.
Thank you. So I think since this time last year, we've been anticipating a rough meeting, and I really don't envy other cities that are looking at capital project deficits and that they have lost money over the last year. Here in the city of Encinitas, we're lucky in that we see our revenues flat. And I think we're coming out of this crisis, being able to reflect on that and look at where we were this time last year. And when we look at where we were in December of 2019, we had just pressed pause on we had just signed the resolution to enter into exploring the iBank funding for the streetscape project. And now here we are coming out of the crisis, looking at our revenues not being hit as hard as we had feared, and that we're actually seeing this flattening here with increases coming forward. And for so many of those reasons that the speakers mentioned, I think it's time to reinvigorate the conversation to actually get the streetscape financed through the iBank loan and dedicate a stream of funding from the hotel that's just come online. It's new revenue. We've never had that revenue from this hotel before, and so I don't think we'll be missing it. And all of the development projects that were listed by speakers in this same corner of Leucadia will also be contributing through property tax revenue every year. And so we're not going to be looking at a situation where, because we commit to a debt service on financing that's projected to be about $2 million a year, at having to sacrifice other projects because of that. And so that's my big takeaway from tonight, is that unlike the other CIPs that we have before us, Streetscape is the return on investment. It is the project that we can count on to bring us returns in sales tax revenue for these small businesses that have largely driven us out of this COVID crisis. I mean, thanks to these small businesses on Highway 101, especially in the downtown area, that were able to stay open because we had this great use of the public space for outdoor dining, we haven't been hit as hard. We're seeing unprecedented levels of investment in this corner of Leucadia too, with a hotel that was over $100 million, and next to see Maria Village coming online is another unprecedented investment of that scale. So I hear the urgency with the at-grade the need for at-grade crossings. I believe that should stay high priority for the city. I think we should put some funding towards that feasibility study this year. But I also think that with all the investments that we make on the rail corridor, the need for safe crossings on the highway, the need to slow traffic on the highway, the need to create this gathering place, a sense of place that takes us back to our historic roots of this being our town square in Leucadia is never going to go away. We're always going to still need those investments. So we have the opportunity now to borrow at a low interest rate. We have the capacity to take on that debt, and we will have a project that actually brings a lot back to us. And so that's, I'm hoping that tonight we can move forward with a recommendation to staff to pursue the financing and come up with a budget that includes the next phase of Streetscape as part of that, because our intention last year was to do a single phase streetscape. I'm so grateful that we've made the investments to move forward. And I think this phase 1, which will result in an undercross being completed this in fall of next year, this is like the down payment on a house. And now is the time that we use the rest of our capacity to finance it. So that's my recommendation. That's what I hope my colleagues will join in supporting me. I also, just before I wrap up my comments, I am really happy to see these plans for Vulcan will come before us again because we do need a pathway. I think La Costa Avenue traffic calming can be done with striping and speed cushions. I loved Christine Schindler's comments about prioritizing non-infrastructure as part of our Safe Routes to School budget. And I hope that out of that money that we're setting aside, we can do a city-driven e-bike course, and we teach teenagers how to safely ride their e-bikes around town. I hope that we can have traffic control people in place, especially around construction projects, so that the city doesn't have to rely solely on the school district to get somebody out there keeping their eyes on kids during our construction projects. And I think that it is important, these smaller ones that I want to not lose sight of, even though there's probably going to be funding in the general mobility funds for these, is Lisa Schaefer's request for Quail Gardens Drive sidewalks to close, and the speaker earlier today, sorry, not to close, but to be completed on Saxony, because we will see a lot of development there. And so these are really common sense ways to get people out of their cars and make these safe connections. And those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lyons.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Blakespear. I would like to just say a few kind of big picture things, because I think that so I get to look at this with new eyes, and the way that I'm looking at the information and evaluating where we stand may be more aligned with how the public is also looking at it. You know, maybe they haven't been really deeply involved for years in decision-making and prioritizing in tiers, but so I think it might be valuable for me to suggest that we add some clarity as we move forward, and perhaps it's at the next time we meet, which is going to be in early May, but we add some clarity to what our tiers are. And I know the information that our city manager presented today is a piece of that, but we almost can't even evaluate a list of what it looks like we should spend our money on unless we look back at what our tiers have been and really assess them against our strategic plan, against our objectives. And then ask ourselves some hard questions about where each of the projects that we've already committed to are aligned as far as in that priority. You know, is safety the highest issue? And maybe that bumps something up. Is mobility an important issue in certain parts of town, which is maybe perhaps tied to safety? That bumps something up in the tier list. And I'm wondering if we get clarity in the bigger picture, if it then helps us move through in decision making. As we move through in decision making, I recommend that after we've made our big decisions, then we really stay on plan and don't re-question, don't go back and say, well, really, should we continue with Leucadia Streetscape? We have committed to it. Should we continue with the street light on Vulcan and La Costa? Well, I believe we committed to that. So it seems like the more we can stay on track with what we've already decided, and we feel that those decisions were valid and they still test out and no new information, then that's the best way to move forward. It's sometimes I think we have really big ideas and we love them, and the public has them too, but to actually get to the point of implementing, we have to be a bit dogmatic. And I hope to be able to add some thoughts in that arena in more detail. Another thing I want to recommend that we do as we move forward and implement our plan of what's going to be built when and what's going to be planned when, is that we focus on conforming with what our city plans and guidelines are. And I just mentioned that because I think sometimes we look at something in some of our ideas and we go, yeah, we'd really like to say underground utilities. But man, that's going to be really expensive on this project. So maybe because of that, we shouldn't. Now I get that, money is short, but if it is our plan that we've decided we are going to apply that policy, then I would really support us sticking to that and looking at the project in terms of, well, it's going to be more expensive. So let's look at how we can get funding for it in a couple of years. What kind of funding can we get? And maybe we can get creative grants and creative ideas about how to fund. And then the last thing I'd like to mention is after we have this kind of structure, how we move through the process and test our decisions back against what we decided our vision, our objectives are, that we build in the flexibility to respond to needs that come up along the way. So I think if we can be structured like that, it might help with clarity. And I'm hearing my colleagues and maybe perhaps the public too, question what direction we're going to go next. And so I think some clarity in that would help everyone. And I hope I was saying that well enough. We've got some, and then I haven't even talked about the detail. I've just enjoyed hearing the public and enjoyed hearing my colleagues. I think everyone is bringing so much great information to the table. The detail that I want to start with, and then I'll hand it off, I'll sit and listen some more, have to do with projects in District 3, because I've kind of focused on those, but I'm learning more about the others. But as far as the projects in District 3, the Birmingham Streetscape is a great opportunity of a project that can be shovel ready. So it's not that far off. According to our own information on our website, it looks like we'll be done with our construction documents sometime early summer. And that's just so important to have projects on the shelf ready for funding and attack all the funding we can get. This has been a hard time. All the jurisdictions, all the municipalities are struggling. We have had a reduced revenue. This is hard. So let's attack some of that federal money we hope will be available. So the more projects we can get shovel ready and on the shelf and ready to go, the better. The thing with Birmingham is it's going to take probably up to a year to underground utilities. So, realistically, there's a time frame there before it can really, get going anyway. So it's going to be a long haul. I get that, but let's get it shovel ready and have it prepared for funds if they're available. And also then, if they're not available, if there are other priorities that are higher need, then it's on our tier and we're going to figure out how to afford that over time. I'd like to say a very similar thing about the Santa Fe Complete Streets project, in that it will be very close to being shovel ready as well. Verde Underpass, I believe, is almost there as well. So those three projects provide opportunities that we want to evaluate when we're evaluating our tiers, getting projects shovel ready, getting them ready to be funded, and then being creative about finding ways to fund them. I think we can do that. I also wanted to ask Pam, our city manager, to follow up, and I don't know if you need to do it now, but I'm aware that we have opportunity funds and we also have replacement funds, which have to do with like our fleet. And, those are funds that we don't necessarily make choices about right now as far as CIP. But from my perspective, I would love to see what the other funding sources are, to see how those funds, the demands and needs of those funds play out. In some cases, and I think this probably has more to do with like the general mobility funds, the ADA ramp funds, and the Safe Routes funds. Some of the things we're talking about could possibly be targeted to be funded through those sources. So I'd just like to have be able to have the conversation, what makes the most sense based on what those projects are and where the logical connection to funds is. Thank you.
So with your permission, Madam Mayor, I think it is important to say, so yes, thank you, all council members. We do fund a number of items each year at a certain dollar value and then bring back projects to you. That is included in the recommended general fund CIP work projects. And I'll just kind of run through them. We always put in $200,000 for safe routes to school, traffic calming at $100,000. We put in $300,000 for mobility projects. We always put in $250,000 for storm drain repairs, $50,000 for ADA curb ramps. So those are included. You'll see most of them are consolidated in that top line for 500 and some plus thousand, and then storm drain is separate for 250. And that is something that the city, you've always directed us to do that, and that's what's in there for the next 2 fiscal years as well.
And if I could just ask if you could follow up on opportunity funds.
I guess I'm not sure what you're referring to about opportunity funds.
I might need to rely on my colleagues here, but I remember we had a fund that was for open space acquisition, we called it the Opportunity Fund.
Oh, okay, so some special funds. Teresa, can you talk a little bit about how we program or how enterprise or other funds are budgeted?
Yes, I can. So we wanted, I believe it was Councilmember Kranz too, suggested that we transfer $500,000 each year from our budget savings to go towards the open space acquisition fund. It was later changed to the opportunity fund so that it could also be used for the development and not just the purchase of land. What happened is $590,000 was transferred to the circulation element. And then for this current year, the remaining $410,000 was returned to the general fund to assist in funding our tier 1 priority projects. So there is no money available in that fund.
Are you talking about the fiscal year that we're in right now or the proposed budget?
The current fiscal year we're in. So last May, when we went through our strategic planning session, we recommended that be returned then, and it was returned in this current fiscal year.
Oh, okay. And that, I think that is helpful. If you could put up slide 21, please. Whoever, Bueller, whoever's doing the slides. Okay. So I did get a couple of questions today. I think it is important to show. So last week we needed to, or last fiscal year, we needed to get over the hump to get streetscape going, and we were short. And so the recommendation last year was to move, I prefer to say reappropriated than defund. These dollars, which were in your budget for 2019-20, were reappropriated by the City Council last May, and those funds were transferred to Streetscape. So there's a couple in here. I know a couple of people have asked about different projects, and those were reappropriated. So that means that those funds were not there any longer to complete those projects. So that's the list. And so you'll notice that some of the items, for example, in the technology on the GIS base and CityWorks server and things like that, you'll see those coming back this year as new requests because we took them out of the budget last year.
Okay, thanks for showing that. That's good to see. Do you have any more comments, City Manager, or should I go to the next council colleagues.
You can go on. I just wanted to share that.
You can leave it there, I think, until someone else wants to see something else. Councilmember Krantz, Deputy Mayor Krantz.
Yes, thank you. It's always a challenge when we get to this exercise, very important exercise. I know that we talk a lot about being able to separate our wants from our needs for prioritizing the expenditure of funds, and the reality is that we haven't heard at a single want. Everything that we've heard about tonight is an absolute need, and it is always so frustrating that our list of needs and the resources required to complete them is always significantly more than the revenue that we have available. So very challenging. The reality, though, is that we have recently, over the last year, allocated $13 million for an undercrossing at El Portal and another 8 or so for a roundabout and the first phase of streetscape. That's $21 million that we are investing in Leucadia and the streetscape project and mobility and some very important, very needed amenities to our community, which will be transformational. So that's a huge investment. And on the slide today, where we see that the need for funding, complete funding of the streetscape project, because we are working on adding a stormwater pipe to the northern end of the project, the need for funding is $47 million. And I recall a year plus ago when we were talking about going to the iBank, that the number that we were using in our conversations as our debt capacity was $30 million. So it doesn't, there's a significant difference there. So I recognize that as the hotel becomes more successful, their projections for transient occupancy tax revenue that will come to the city is in the vicinity of $1.5 million. And if we were able to dedicate that to the payment of the loan through the infrastructure bank, it would make complete sense to take advantage of the infrastructure bank to advance some of these very important capital projects in the north part of our city, Northwest specifically. So while I understand Councilmember Hensey's focus on borrowing money to try and build all of the streetscape, I think that the math is going to be difficult to add up to being able to do that. So I don't doubt that it's worth exploring, but again, I think that this process that we're going through, where we get stimulus for A Street to Marchetta, and we look for another stimulus package that we might be able to get for the northern part. We look for grant funds for stormwater projects, and we work through the very challenging financing aspects of a significant capital project is the better approach. And then as we establish the revenue of the hotel or these new developments, that we look at the possibility of borrowing money to keep the construction moving along. So that's where I would prefer to go, which is to still wait and see how the revenue works out and actually have some of the TOT in hand before we get too far down the road with the infrastructure bank. And part of it is because I don't want to tap all of our borrowing capacity for the construction of this very important capital project. We have other significant needs all over town, but especially in the Northwest. La Costa Avenue desperately needs some work and significant improvements to enhance safety and make pedestrian and bike amenities that are long overdue. Not to mention the very important cross connections that we need in the corridor, especially between Leucadia Boulevard and La Costa Avenue. So one of the things that I have done in the last few weeks, along with Councilmember Hinsey, is we had a meeting with the CPUC and NCTD and the Federal Railroad Administration to talk about the possibility of putting at-grade crossings in the stretch of the rail corridor between Leucadia Boulevard and La Costa Avenue. And the response was one that I was not totally expecting, but the Federal Railroad Administration representative did mention the idea of putting in at-grade crossings similar to what they have in San Clemente. And so before I see us spend money to study grade separated crossings in that much more difficult northern end of the rail corridor, I would much rather see us pivot and approach, look at conducting the study that's necessary to justify putting in at-grade crossings. And so I believe that was in a slide in the appendix. There was a $250,000 line item for at-grade crossing studies, and I would prefer to advance that project and hold off on the grade separated studies that we've been talking about, because I think in the end, having the at-grade crossings between Leucadia Boulevard and La Costa Avenue would be much better for the community, in part because we could have more than one, most likely. And so I think that's worth pursuing. I have a photograph that I took from Google Earth. I did go up to San Clemente and took a look at their at-grade crossings. And as you can see, here's about 1,600 feet of shoreline in San Clemente, and they have 1, 2, 3 at-grade crossings in that 1,600 feet. And so they have managed to have the access to the coast that we haven't been able to attain. And I think that it would be well worth taking the time to make the study and make the case that an at-grade crossing is a good investment in the stretch between Leucadia Boulevard and La Costa Avenue. Here's a photograph of one of the at-grade crossings in San Clemente, and here's a photograph of what their trail looks like along their rail corridor. And they have about a half dozen at-grade crossings throughout about a 2.5 mile stretch. And I was encouraged by the response of the Federal Railroad Administration representative, who suggested that this might be a solution that could be implemented in North Leucadia. So again, I'm interested in having council support for pivoting to a study of at-grade crossings as opposed to grade separated between Leucadia Boulevard and La Costa Avenue.
Okay. Before going on from that comment, could staff just explain the $400,000 North Leucadia rail crossing study? What does that fund?
Actually, we put that dollar amount in knowing that there was 2 different directions that this could go. So the last slide saying that the study is needing 250. We had to program something in. If you decide to do the at-grade crossing, we could probably, I don't know where the 250 came from, but if we do that, if you decide to do that, there will be a little bit of money that will pull from that and you could put into something else. If you want to continue down the road of the undercrossing, then that's the amount of money that we wanted to make sure that we plugged in some money for that. So it's a plug number for now, but definitely one of the areas that we need direction.
And was that direction going to happen at the meeting on May, what was it, 12th? Or is that
No, that's direction we're looking for tonight. Remember, May 12th is moving around some mobility and already funded items, in part some in this fiscal year. This is direction that we were hoping to get from you tonight, either to bring back more information or to talk a little bit about that particular direction that you want us to go. And Lillian, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yes, so the status of the undercrossing RFP is that it has been re-announced, as we did not receive sufficient bids in response to the January RFP. So we are moving forward with respect to that item. However, we do need funds in order to move forward with an undercrossing preliminary engineering and design effort. However, if Councilmember Kranz's recommendation does move forward this evening, then we would be able to pursue a safe rail crossing. We have done research with respect to the process that was pursued in the most recent approved at-grade crossing, which was in Carpinteria for the County of Santa Barbara. And we have also looked into the San Clemente circumstances. So I stand by if there are any questions regarding an at-grade safe rail crossing study.
And let me add that the result of the meeting that we had, it was held via Zoom. City staff participated, North County Transit District staff participated. A couple of representatives from the California Public Utilities Commission who regulate railroads in California were there, and the representative from the Federal Railroad Administration. And there was an acknowledgement that we have a unique situation and that it indeed might need some, a different treatment than is common. And so they were prepared to acknowledge that, and if there was a study that was done that justified it from a safety standpoint, that there could be these at-grade crossings, and it would actually make the corridor between Leucadia Boulevard and actually the corridor between Encinitas Boulevard and La Costa Avenue safer, then it would have a chance. And so I'm not interested in chasing my tail, tilting at windmills, whatever saying you want to use, but I came away from that meeting feeling somewhat optimistic, and I'll leave, Kelly was in the meeting as well. She may have, it might be worth hearing her perspective, but we have a lot of support at North County Transit District for creating, crossings, safe and legal crossings, because the situation with the fence is going to clearly create tension between people who want to get from either side of the railroad corridor to either their homes or to the businesses and the beach. And so there is a significant interest in getting this addressed sooner rather than later. And the path of a grade separated crossing is one that through the history of grade separated crossings here in Encinitas take many, many years to complete and to secure the funding to construct. So this would be a situation that I think would facilitate getting these crossings in sooner rather than later. And the other thing is that stretch of track between Leucadia Boulevard and La Costa Avenue still has some, there's the double tracking project, and there hasn't been a design of that. And so there are a number of questions that would suggest that investing in a grade separated crossing there might not be a good investment, because depending on what they do with the double tracking and some other things, it could be impacted. So there's another thought that this would essentially be an interim until the region came up with a strategy for the double tracking through that stretch as well. So I think there are a lot of good reasons to pivot and really aggressively pursue these options of at-grade crossings and muster the political capital to see them through. So
okay,
that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Okay, so just to focus everybody's comments, it's after 9 now, and I think we become tired and, emotionally depleted as well. So we have a draft budget in front of us, and then you guys are making individual comments like, we should support the iBank and fund it for 30 million at Leucadia Streetscape. We should do a tiering system. We should change this crossing to be a different type of crossing. So if your comments could respond to either the budget that we have in front of us and your colleagues, we could try to move forward like with what our direction is. And I'll just say, I'm going to call on you next, Councilmember Musk. I see you're ready, but I might suggest that we just say we're going to talk about the budget again. Like we have 7 meetings between now and when we have to pass the budget, but that we get a draft that's fuller and that we have some more of these questions answered, like about what does it really look like to go this different direction with the crossing, and what can we think about our options for Leucadia Streetscape, and so that's what I would probably suggest here, because I don't feel like we're kind of coming together on a particular direction related to this budget. So anyway, I'll put that out there, and then you can go ahead, Councilmember Moscow.
Yeah, no, those are some good comments, Madam Mayor. I agree with you. And also, this is always one of the conversations that I look forward to every year, setting our priorities, setting our goals for the year. And I think, all of you are just kind of listening, sitting back and listening to all the comments. I mean, everybody's comments are kind of, just right on. And, listening to Joy, this is your first time. And your comments I thought were insightful. And in that we're actually doing it a bit different this year. And maybe it's because of the pandemic, but in the past, what we have done is that we've done strategic planning, and those goals lead and inform our investments. And so, Joy brought that up. Yes, that's how we've done it before. We would actually take an entire day to meet and have a bunch of data and information that we look at and do a lot of goal setting, and then talk about capital projects and also operational. We haven't talked about operational as well. And so I think that makes it a little bit easier when we're talking about our goals and our priorities, and then some of the things naturally fall in line. And I also agree with Joy that once we make those priorities, those commitments, that we shouldn't be lightly turning away from those commitments. And so I just that planning session generally was during, we would go start the planning session at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning. So doing this at 9 o'clock at night is not the most optimal time. So I agree with the Mayor. I think that we deserve to have another session on this, perhaps even earlier, and perhaps taking into consideration everything that's been said tonight. Just want to address some of the comments made by my colleagues. In terms of at-grade crossings, I'm in favor of anything that is going to get Leucadia more crossings. In fact, more crossings throughout the whole rail corridor. At one time, we talked about those pre-manufactured things that what is it, Caltrans or somebody put down in the southern portion of the corridor. Give me those if we can. Whatever we can do to enhance, to increase the amount of crossings, safe crossings in the northern portions of that corridor. I just don't want to basically, I think Tony alluded to this, I don't want to be chasing our tail. We started off with a mixture of at-grade and grade separated kind of crossings. I was on the mobility, livability, and work group, or however it was said, but I was on that group. And we came up with, a lot of Leucadians actually were advocating at that time, several years ago, 5-6 years ago, for at-grade crossings, and a lot of Cardiffians were actually advocating for grade separated. But then we basically transitioned to grade separated, and we transitioned because the regulatory body here, which there's many, but the California Public Utilities Commission has a big say in this, and they weren't keen on at-grade crossings. And so I'm all about fast, putting in something that makes sense, preserves that crossing, and then makes it as safe as possible. So if at-grade is good, and we can legitimately and in a real way actually focus on that and move in that direction, let's do it. But I want to make sure that it's informed. And so what I would say is that I don't have enough information to understand We pivoted before, and so if we're going to pivot again, I want to make sure that there's a path forward. And it sounds like, I think that at grade crossings could be less expensive and we could implement them faster. I don't know. I'm making an assumption about that. So I want to make sure that staff is looking at that from a regulatory standpoint. Is this acceptable? Because we pivoted before because we were told that it wasn't acceptable. Is it acceptable? Is it cheaper? Can it be done in a safe manner? I think that's important. In terms of the conversation about funding for a specific project, I would just say that it would be good to have a broader conversation, because Tony talked about the needs of the city. These are absolute needs. These aren't wants. We're talking about safety issues. We're talking about mobility. We're talking about absolute needs of the city. And so I think that we ought not be just talking about one project, but we ought to be talking about, what's the solution? We set expectations that a lot of these projects were going to be implemented, from streetscape to safe crossings, safety measures on Rancho Santa Fe Road and several other streets, trails all throughout our city, mobility projects, Pacific View, Birmingham Complete Street, Santa Fe, La Costa and Vulcan, Quail Gardens, Saxony. We talked about a whole host of projects. And so I would just say that if we're going to have a conversation about enhancing revenues or ways of implementing these projects, I want to broaden that conversation to include all of the amazing needs of this city, and have a conversation about, how do we basically meet these needs and meet the expectations of residents, and just, how are we going to do this? There's all of these different potential buckets of money out there. Kevin Doyle talked about stimulus package and why we're not talking about some of the potential funding that's going to be available. And so I think that we need to have a broader conversation about these needs, a broader conversation about how we fund these needs, especially since a lot of them are ones that we've really kind of, put out, we've really built expectation around them. So it's really hard to not kind of be talking about that and talking about solutions of ways that we can actually get it done. Last comment is really about some of these kind of priorities that we put in the on the slide deck today, that we've said are kind of their priorities, and we're going to put them out there, but they're not necessarily for conversation tonight because they're not general fund. We're not taking general fund dollars, but we're taking some other dollars from ATP and all these other special programs. I'm fine with that, but I would like to see more data on that, because I don't want to make decisions about what we're allocating from the general fund and not knowing whether or not, for instance, there's going to be enough in the ATP or the whatever other grant that's out there, that there's going to be enough funding for the Rancho Santa Fe Road improvements that we've been talking about. We've had a fatality on this road. We've had, people that have been seriously injured. There's a lot of different projects that the task force has been working on over the last 2 years. We've spent $50,000 in that study, and a lot of staff time and a lot of residents' time putting that together. So I want to make sure that at least with respect to the low-lying fruit, that there's a pathway forward. And also when we're talking about Vulcan and La Costa, that there's a pathway forward for some of these projects that I think are, especially when you look at Vulcan and the striping, that these are maintenance issues. But I want to make sure that when we're making decisions about the general fund, what the general fund's going to kind of contribute to the CIP, that I'm informed about how these other things are going to get are going to move forward as well. So thank you.
Does the city manager want to jump in before we go to Councilmember Lyons?
Sure. I just wanted to mention that we also are looking forward to stimulus and grant funding, et cetera. But what we're bringing forward today is with the money that we know that we have right now. So I wouldn't want the public to think, or the council to think, that we are not planning to come forward. This is a great year with the Biden administration. We're really hopeful for funding, but we don't know what that is yet. And so once we do, I imagine that this year we'll be coming back a couple of different times to ask you about projects when we know what those funding rules will be.
Okay. Councilmember Lyons.
Thank you, Mayor Blakespear. I will be brief. There's something I want to reinforce before we're finished. And it touches on something our city manager, Pam, has said, but I want to make a point. Since I've been in the design and construction industry for many, many decades, I just wanted to explain that escalation of costs is something that we should make sure we really have a handle on when we're looking at our budgeting. It's typical in my industry for projects to last for several years. The design will take a year, then working through the city process will take a year, and getting permits and undergrounding and utilities and another year. And before you know it, you're 3 to 5 years out. And if you've still got the same budget you thought it was going to cost initially, you're going to be surprised when you get your bids in. And this is just so important in my industry that when we have complex projects, and in those cases, usually I'd be a subconsultant to a civil engineer or an architect, someone who's leading the work, and I'm a subconsultant. But they would hire specialists who do construction cost estimating to help then make sure that it's estimated appropriately for what's going to be bid, because none of us want to be surprised. So my point is there are specialists in the field, and perhaps we have some of those kinds of specialists on call for the city that we could tap them for some guidance on how to build into our budgeting the reality of construction costs change annually, or they change regularly. And it varies a little bit depending on what the economy is and what the larger structure is, but we need to make sure that's built in. I see that maybe sometimes we get a little surprised by what the numbers are, and I would like to help us not be surprised. Unfortunately, that means that numbers are going to be bigger, but that's just the reality of the industry. That was my point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And last comment, Councilmember Kranz, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, quickly. I did want to acknowledge Michael von Neumann, Judy Burrowfine, Christine Schindler, some of these folks that have sent emails and were on the record tonight supporting creative use of paint to establish what will eventually be the lane configuration and features of the streetscape on the north end of town. I spent some time on a Zoom call with 3 gentlemen who live in Sea Bluff, and they are really frustrated with the challenge of getting out of their development there on the north end of town. When people hit that La Costa Avenue green light, they're heading south at 50 miles an hour plus, and people trying to come out of Sea Bluff to go north and even to go south are really challenged by all of the traffic issues that they're dealing with. Bicyclists, people turning left, going northbound. There's just a ton of stuff going on up there, and it's my hope that we can get creative with some traffic calming measures as an interim tool to address those issues while we're working to get the full funding for the beautiful streetscape that we're working on.
Okay, thank you. Okay, very last comment, Councilmember Hinsey.
I'll try to make it quick, but I would just say in support of going after this IBAG financing, when we were looking at it, it was that we were able to put in a whole bunch of shovel-ready projects. And so we weren't only focusing on the streetscape. We were able to say, here are the top 5-10 projects we want to accomplish in the city. And then we didn't take our foot off the gas in applying for all of these infrastructure grants that come from higher levels of government. And so that would be the same model that we would be pursuing here too, is we would not say we're putting all the eggs in the streetscape basket. We're saying we're going to lock in these construction costs at this time to avoid future rising costs. And we are able to accomplish a great many other projects at the same time. So I will say that. And I also appreciate Councilmember Kranz's call out to doing the streetscape with a tactical urbanism approach. And while I do support that, I think that the sum of streetscape's parts, all the amenities were designed and permitted and entitled to work together. And I love the idea of having the lane narrowing, but I don't know how much that alleviates our circulation problems without the roundabouts, which we know are costly. And to be pulling up all of the, doing the roundabouts without doing the trees and the undergrounding and all these other things that we've fully designed and planned for, to me feels like a missed opportunity. So that's the last that I'll say about that. But just to respond to the mayor's question about the budget that's in front of us, I'm really happy that there's $1 million for Pacific View that will be intact. I support that. And I do support knowing what all these other things are, but it's going to be really hard for me to approve a budget that doesn't have some funding for streetscape as part of it. So on the at-grade question, I think that it's still worth our staff time and the energy to explore at-grade crossings, but I know that there are issues that will come about as we go through this process, which include the wayside horns and some CPUC questions that are outstanding. But we do have support from our Assemblymember Tasha Burner Horvath, who authored a bill to give cities like ours technical assistance when pursuing at-grade crossings. So that's encouraging. And I do think that this is a worthwhile road to continue traveling till we get to the point where we say, okay, for whatever reason, we can't do at-grades and we need to do a single undercrossing. So that's all I've got to say.
Okay, thank you. So there are just 3 items that are in here that I wanted to ask to be reconsidered, and maybe it could save us $1 million almost. So the parking lot at Glen Park, the housing element update for 500,000, and the code cleanup for 100,000. My hope would be that staff could do housing element update and code cleanup. And I know when it comes to housing element update, we've had a lot of obvious problems, but we are now, I hope, on the other side of that and having a lot of conversations about other cities that were out of compliance. The state has provided funding for planning documents, and basically it just seems like we should try to in-house this instead of having so much consultant work related to our housing element once we approve our get compliant. And so I just, I know my colleagues have said all the different things in the city, and I won't repeat because I don't want to be a windbag, basically, but I support all of it. I support Rancho Santa Fe road improvements. I support crossing the tracks improvements, La Costa improvements, Leucadia streetscape improvements, Santa Fe, Birmingham, third roundabout at Leucadia Boulevard, this whole range of things, Pacific View, all the things we're trying to do. And I think just the difficulty is to say, okay, well, what are we really going to do next year? And maybe it's 1 year and 2 years if it's a 2-year budget. But when you look at this, what we're going to do, according to what the budget currently says, is we're going to do $400,000 to look at crossing in Northwest Leucadia. That's a new project that's pretty substantial. And we're also going to do a El Camino del Norte, $321,000. So, that's a pretty major, sounds like that's a pretty major project. And then a lot of these other things are just, they almost are like sand. It's like little things that need to happen, and it just is there, but they're not like a big bang for your buck. Councilmember Kranz, the deputy mayor, mentioned what big investments are happening right now. And it is true. I mean, I drove it today to see what it was looking like, and it's changing every day. Major project on Highway 101 that we're mostly funding. I mean, it's been funded by a bit of a grant, but mostly it's our general fund. So all these, if we're going to change the direction of this in any way at the next time we talk in more depth, I think, we're going to have to make decisions about some of this stuff. So about removing some of this stuff. So to me, it would be useful if the next time this was presented, the things that staff felt were absolutely imperative because of legal mandates or safety concerns, like, you know, the fire department having these new radios, MHC radio, you know, stuff like that, that be in a separate category, because having those mixed in with this, I find that hard, kind of somewhat hard to process. But I would also hope that, and I'll work with the city manager as the mayor to plan, but maybe we could plan this. We didn't do our strategic planning. We could do like a budgeting during the day where we could talk in more depth about it. And maybe it'll be in person, who knows? I think the city manager is going to make an update about going back to in person and opening City Hall in just a minute. But we'll plan something, because we do have a little bit of time before the budget's due. And I think we need to talk about this stuff in greater context. So with that, I will, I think that's it on this item. Do you need anything else from us, city manager?
No, that sounds good, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, so that's the end of our action items. And thank you to all the public who commented too, and called in and also sent in emails. So does the city manager want to make a report?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. I would like to announce that we are moving towards some type of reopening of City Hall and city facilities on June 15th, in conjunction with the governor's announcement that multiple tier levels will be removed and there will be a state reopening. We're working very closely with the county to determine what that will be, and have made that announcement to our employees and our union groups to let them know that people should be prepared to come back into work on site. So we're really excited about that. As we have more details about that, we will certainly let you know. And with regard to that, we'll be seeking some guidance from the county on public meetings, such as city council meetings. And we will find more about that. Reopening City Hall may or may not mean that we can meet again in public in the council chambers, but we're certainly looking into that.
Okay, great. Any AB 1, 2, 3, 4 reports that people feel compelled to make? Okay, don't see any city attorney report.
Yes, briefly, thank you, Mayor and Council. Early on in the meeting, I reported out on the special closed session of March 31st. What I would like to do is not edit or change the report out on item 1, which is significant exposure to litigation. But I'd like to add to it, voluntarily add, in the spirit of transparency, that the council did give direction to special legal counsel to prepare a written report on considering the housing element for the open session. That report was provided as backup on April 7th for the housing item per the council direction. But to repeat, there's the report out, the legal report out is no legal action. The council took no votes, made no decisions, etc. But that direction was given. And that concludes my reported add-on.
Okay, thank you. City clerk report?
I have nothing, thank you.
Okay, well, I got my second vaccine today. I hope all of you are moving forward with that process too. And with that, we are adjourned.